Welcome to Senpai, your new home for immersive manga, manhwa, anime-inspired novels, and fantasy audiobook stories. Here, every episode brings you into a world of overpowered heroes, revenge arcs, cultivation journeys, virtual reality games, monsters, magic, and emotional character moments. Whether you enjoy dark fantasy, action, reincarnation, system stories, or epic adventure novels, Senpai is here to turn every chapter into a cinematic listening experience. So relax, put on your headphones, and let the story begin. Subscribe to Senpai and join the journey. Li Qingcang knew that her grandmother was thrifty. If she openly suggested going to town for a medical checkup, her grandmother would definitely refuse to go. However, if she made it sound like she was asking for her grandmother to accompany her to the interview, then her grandmother would definitely agree to go with her. So, does one need to go through an interview for acceptance into Capital University? Grandma hadn't heard of anyone having to go through an interview in order to gain acceptance into Capital University before. But then again, no one in the vicinity of the town of Yancheng had ever made it into Capital University. Not Capital University. It's an art academy where graduates become actors. Hearing the word actor, Grandma asked Li Tianxin, so, upon graduation, would you be able to act in television dramas? Oh, yes, and also act in movies and theater. Grandma, actually, I was worried about not being able to get into Capital University. That's why I'm going to the interview at the film academy. It's my backup plan. What do you think? Is it a good plan? Tianxin, you've truly matured. I can see that you've thought through this very carefully. Li Tianxin's eyes turned slightly red and a little teary. In her past life, she had been so wild that now just a small positive change in her was enough to make her grandmother so happy. Her grandmother had aged. Her face seemed more wrinkled than before.
Ye Tianjin sikit.
Time, why are you moving so quickly? Please slow down and decrease your pace. Give me a chance to be a filial granddaughter to my grandma. Oh yes, Tianxin. Wait here. Her grandmother went into her room and returned with a bank deposit book, which she handed over to Li Tianxin. Under the pale yellow light in the yard, Li Tianxin noticed the numerals in the deposit book. Grandma has been saving up to pay for your college education. I'm not sure if this is enough. If not, I'll sell this house. The amount in the deposit book barely added up to $50,000. It was money her grandmother had saved from making and selling insoles for shoes, stitching every insole by hand. The deposit book felt like it weighed 1,000 kilos in gold to Li Tianxin, who clutched it in her hand. Shoving the deposit book back into her grandmother's hands, she said with a huge smile, Grandma, I won't need the money in this account for college. Where will you get the money from, then? If you don't intend to use this money that I've saved up? Grandma asked. Holding her grandmother's hands, Li Tianxin, looking serious, reassured her. Scholarships. Grandma, did you know I can get scholarships? I heard that if I get accepted into Capital University, the offices in the township, county, city, and province will all grant me award money. Also, most importantly, Capital University might also waive my college fees. Grandma found all this a tad unbelievable and asked, will there really be award money? Of course. Didn't someone from our school get a scholarship from the city last year? So, Grandma, you have to have confidence in me. Her grandmother was so happy, she couldn't stop laughing. Okay, good. That's good. Li Tianxin finished eating her noodles and wanted to wash her dish, but her grandmother refused to let her. They argued for a long time before Li Tianxin eventually went ahead and washed her own dish. After she put away the cleaned dishes, she sat down by her grandmother's side. Noting that Li Tianxin was watching her stitching the insole in her hands, Grandma said, Tianxin, if you're tired of studying, go watch some TV and relax instead of watching me stitching insoles. You'll hurt your eyes. Grandma, I don't want to watch TV. The television set they had was an old model, a black and white set. And television programs were scarce, the capital station being the only station from which they could receive any programs. Tianxin, after your college entrance exams, Grandma will buy you of one of those notebook computers so that you won't have to go to the internet cafes anymore. Based on what her grandmother said, Li Tianxin knew that Auntie Zhu had most certainly been to see her grandmother again. Grandma, notebook computers are expensive. Don't they cost more than 10,000? After school this afternoon, I did visit the internet cafe, but not for fun. I went online to fill out an application. Grandma, in future, please don't believe what Auntie Zhu tells you. All she wants is our house. Laughing, Grandma replied, how much could this house of ours even be worth? And, even if she wants it, I won't let her have it. I want to leave it to you so that, when I'm dead and gone, you'll always have a home to come back to. Indeed, Grandma truly and deeply loved Tianxin. She didn't dislike Qingxin just because she was a girl. To her grandmother, Tianxin was her beloved and good granddaughter, regardless of how or what she turned out to be. Grandma, stop talking about death and dying. My wish is for you to live a long life, to live to 100 years old. You've spent your entire lifetime toiling for me, and I've yet to pamper you with the luxuries of life. Listening to Li Tianxin, her grandmother realized that she was speaking from the bottom of her heart and couldn't help responding like a delighted child. Okay, Grandma will wait to be pampered. In her quest to gain acceptance to Capital University, Li Qingxin would cram at the evening self-study sessions at school and then continue to study for a good few hours in her own home. Every morning, before the sun was up, Yi Tianxin would get out of bed and, carrying her school bag, would run into the rising sun. The sight of the pretty and high-spirited person inevitably invited glances from passers-by on the roads. When she saw people she recognized, Yi Qingxin would always greet them. "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Passing by a cross junction, Yi Qingxin noticed a team of surveyors with their tripod in the process of making assessments. "We're doing some mapping and surveying. We heard that this little town will be rebuilt soon."
Ye Tianjin felt her in Sidesburn.
So it turned out that at this time in her past life, the scheme had already been put in motion. Did this mean that in her past life Yi Yuran's family knew way before Yi Tianxin and her grandmother about the plan to rebuild and modernize the town Yancheng, turning it into a tourist attraction? Yi Yuran and her family used to live near them in their neighborhood. Then, they sold their house to another party and used the money to build a 2-story house outside the Yancheng bus station. Auntie Zhu used the ground floor of the house to set up a store selling miscellaneous goods. Business was generally good since they were close to the bus station. So this meant that they must have learned of the plan to rebuild the town of Yancheng long before Yi Tianxin. If that was the case, then was her grandmother's death in her previous life an unnatural death? Suddenly, Yi Tianxin felt a sharp pain in her heart. She'd always assumed that her grandmother died of illness. But now it seemed that her grandmother had been murdered as part of a scheme plotted by Yi Yuran's family. In the face of money, Yi Tianxin knew that the human heart knows no bounds when it comes to committing evil for gain. Yi Tianxin was deep in thought as she walked. When Annie Zhu turned up at their house that day and offered to provide and care for her grandmother in her old age, had it all been part of their plan? If it was, then they surely wouldn't stop whatever they planned to do.
Ye Tianjin clenched her fists.
This time, she wouldn't let Yi Yuran and her family get away with their evil scheme. So what should she do? Yi Tianxin arrived at the school. As she walked past the university wall, she looked at the numerous rows of tightly packed brass plates hanging up there, and her gaze fell upon a brass plate that read, University of Law and Regulations. That was it. They should transfer the title deed of their house to her. That way, Yi Yuran and her family wouldn't prey on Grandma anymore. At least, Grandma would be safe. Temporarily. Yi Tianxin, what are you thinking about? I called you several times, but you didn't respond and seemed so out of it. Di Shanshi walked up to Yi Tianxin from behind. Standing at 1.8 meters, he was very tall, slim and bespectacled. He looked every inch the cultured scholar.
Di Shanshi, perfect timing.
I have a question for you. What is it? I remembered that your father works in town. Can you please find out for me what documents or information I need to prepare if I want to transfer the title deed to my grandmother's house to me? Di Shanshi peered at Yi Tianxin through his glasses. Since he shared a desk with her, he was very much aware of the change that had recently taken place in Yi Tianxin. He reasoned that Yi Tianxin must have encountered something pretty dire to have practically grown up overnight. I can find out for you. However, the law states that only people who are 18 and above have civil liability. I don't think you're 18 yet, are you? I'm almost 18. I can prepare the required information and documentation before I turn 18. Furtively, Yi Tianxin pulled Di Shanshi aside to sit by a flower bed and said, Di Shanshi, I'll be honest with you. I saw a surveyor team at the crossroad near our school. As you know, there's only me and my grandmother in our family, and I'm worried about people scheming to get their hands on our house. Di Shanshi hadn't expected Yi Tianxin to confide in him about such private matters. His heart fluttered with happiness. Did this mean that Yi Tianxin regarded him as a friend? Surely not. As someone who had died once, Yi Tianxin knew better than anyone the importance of being prepared and nipping a growing problem in the bud. Auntie Zhu's motive couldn't have been more obvious. Yi Tianxin's rationale was that if Auntie Zhu couldn't fool her grandmother with the offer to be her caregiver in her old age, she'd surely find another way to mislead and trap her grandmother. Her grandmother was old, and an easy target for scams. Yi Tianxin wasn't the least interested in her grandmother's bit of property. However, she didn't want her grandmother to be cheated by others in her naivety. Not to mention the fact that Grandma had lived in that place for decades and had grown emotionally attached to it. And it was her home too. She couldn't let her home be destroyed, just in case her mother returned one day. We must never let our guard down. Di Shanshi, please find out for me. Thank you. To Di Shanshi, this request wasn't too big of a deal. It was something he could easily get done, so he saw no reason to refuse his help. In fact, when he got home last night, he had shared his thoughts with his parents. He told them that he wanted to apply for admission to Capital University. He said that he'd resit the entrance exams if he couldn't make it on the first attempt, and that it was his dream to continue his studies at Capital University. Actually, that wasn't why. He wanted to sit the entrance exams for Capital University because of the girl whose smile was as sweet as maple syrup. He wanted to be there with her and bask in the glory of studying at Capital University. He wanted to be a first-hand witness to everything she did. We share the same desk in class. You don't need to be so formal with me. One behind the other, they filed into the classroom. Noticing Yi Tianxin, Li Xiaowei announced in her gentle voice, Tianxin, the homeroom teacher wants to see you. I'll bring your school bag in for you. Handing her school bag to Di Shanshi, Yi Tianxin walked toward the teacher's office. Sir. The homeroom teacher glanced at Yi Tianxin and asked, Where were you last night? I was in the classroom all last night, Yi Tianxin replied, not knowing that Yi Yuran had lied about her whereabouts. Sir, what is it? The recruitment teacher at the film academy called for you last night. Yi Tianxin was stunned. They called her last night, barely 2 hours after she submitted her email application. They seemed super efficient, almost too efficient to believe. The recruitment teacher said that they have received your email and that you should go for a preliminary interview on March 18th. March 18th. That was only 3 days away. Yi Tianxin did the math in her head. Since the trains ran through the town of Yancheng, she could catch the train directly from the Yancheng station. The journey would take 2 days and 2 nights, which meant that she and her grandmother would have to catch the train that night. If they missed the train, she wouldn't be able to attend her preliminary interview. Naturally, the homeroom teacher had also thought about this issue. Yi Tianxin, you must think this through carefully. Are you sure you want to go for the interview at Capital Film Academy? Have you considered that if you can't get there in time, you would be making a wasted trip? I'm sure. Having estimated the travel time in her head, Yi Tianxin decided that although they'd have to hurry, they shouldn't have any problems getting to the university in time for her interview. And it didn't matter if she didn't make it to the interview on time. After all, this trip to Capital City was for her grandmother to get a medical checkup. That was the most important thing. So, sir, may I take a leave of absence for a week or half a month, please? The homeroom teacher frowned. Recently, Yi Tianxin's schoolwork had just begun showing some steady improvement. If she were to take time off now, would her work deteriorate? Sir, here's the thing. I did some research online and discovered that there are 3 interviews in total, first, second, and the final one. It would be a waste of time and energy to come home and then go back to Capital University again for each interview. I'm prepared to try my best in these interviews. Also, my grandmother is getting on in years, and I want to take her there for a medical checkup. Since Yi Tianxin seemed to have ample reasons for requesting time off, the homeroom teacher decided not to make any further comment. All right then. I'll ask Di Shanshi to collate the recent study notes for you. Expect to have to work super hard when you return. If you're planning to be away for half the month, that means you barely have 2 weeks before the mock exam. I understand. Thank you, sir. I'll head out now. Returning to the classroom, Yi Tianxin retrieved her school bag, which was next to Di Shanshi. Yi Tianxin, class will start soon. Where are you going? I've asked for 2 weeks leave of absence. Di Shanshi, about my request, please find out for me.
I'm off now.
Wait for good news from me. A short while after Yi Tianxin's departure, the homeroom teacher walked into the classroom, teaching manual in hand. Standing on the podium, he faced the students and said, Everyone, since Yi Tianxin has been notified by the Capital Film Academy about an impending interview, she has asked for 2 weeks leave of absence. I hope that during this period all of you will give your best and study hard. Capital Film Academy? It wasn't a school the third-year high school students at Yancheng High School were familiar with. The majority of the students didn't even know that such a school existed. Pencil in hand, Yi Yuran looked up at the homeroom teacher and asked, trying to look innocent, Sir, Capital Film Academy, what type of school is it? Capital Film Academy is our nation's only world-renowned film academy for professional actors. The character Qingxin in the drama series, Happiness, graduated from this film academy. Upon hearing the name Qingxin, Li Xiaoyi's eyes gleamed. Happiness was a television drama series that told the rags-to-riches story of a factory girl who rose against all odds from the ranks of the factory floor production lines to become an accomplished female entrepreneur. The drama series, from start to end, was truly inspirational. The streets were literally empty whenever it was on TV. Sir, may I also apply for the academy? Li Xiaoyi raised her hand and asked. The homeroom teacher replied, Well, Capital Film Academy's recruitment drive has ended. However, if you're interested in pursuing this further, please come see me later. I think the recruitment drive at Fleur Institute of Theater Studies is still open. That's that then. So, if any of you have further questions, please see me later. Now, let's begin our lesson. With her school bag on her back, Yi Tianxin sped across town. Being market day, the streets of Yancheng town were packed with people. Yi Tianxin's first stop was the Yancheng train station. Since the Yancheng train station was very small, the trains would usually stop for no more than 2 minutes. If she missed the train for that day, then she would have to wait another 2 days for the next one. If that happened, she definitely wouldn't be able to attend the scheduled interview. Yi Tianxin first went to buy the train tickets. She had originally planned to get a sleeper for her grandmother and a seat for herself. However, when she arrived at the ticket booth, the female salesperson informed Yi Tianxin, there are no more sleepers or seats. Do you still want tickets? Yes, I do. Yi Tianxin was very determined and bought the tickets anyway. She reasoned that they could always board the train and wait until a sleeper became available. When that happened, she could exchange her grandmother's ticket for a sleeper. Having bought the train tickets, Yi Tianxin went to look for her grandmother. Her grandmother was seated at a street corner, a tray displaying insoles in a multitude of colors in front of her. Auntie Zhu was seated beside her grandmother and was talking to her. Incensed by Auntie Zhu's shameless and despicable behavior, Yi Tianxin said, Grandma. Auntie Zhu raised her head and, seeing Yi Tianxin's pretty face, said awkwardly, Oh, Tianxin, shouldn't you be at school? Have you played truant again? At Auntie Zhu's words, the other stallholders around them looked up at Yi Tianxin, their eyes all saying the same thing. Why are you being such an inconsiderate and immature child? Your grandmother is already so old. Why are you making her life miserable? That's what they were all thinking. Helping her grandmother pack up, Yi Tianxin berated Auntie Zhu. Auntie Zhu, how can you smear another person's reputation so casually? As to why I'm not at school, why don't you ask Ran during lunch? It's market day today. Why aren't you minding your own store instead of coming here to seek out my grandmother? Don't tell me you're still talking about being grandma's caregiver in the future? Young lady, your auntie is right. You're a girl, so you'll eventually be married off. Surely you can't be at your grandmother's side all the time. Isn't it a good thing that you'll be relieved of the burden of having to take care of your grandmother with your auntie's offer to be her caregiver? Yi Tianxin helped her grandmother up and was about to make a rebuttal, but just then she felt her grandmother pat her hand gently, as if to signal to her to stop talking. Elder sisters, this sun is too hot. Sell off your wares quickly and get home soon. These are family matters, and I know what I'm doing. Yi Tianxin supported her grandmother as they walked away together. Watching the grandmother and granddaughter leave the scene, Auntie Zhu exclaimed, "My aunt is an old muddle-headed so-and-so. That wild girl is uneducated, has no skills, and is always staying away from school, getting into fights, and everything else. What has my aunt got to look forward to in that girl? You people, please tell me, am I not trying to do a good thing here? Why is it that, in their eyes, I've become the bad person? I give up. I'm not going to waste my time with them. In time, she'll be shedding rivers of tears." After they had walked for some distance, Grandma asked, "Tianxin, shouldn't you be in school? Why did you come back?" "Grandma, we need to go to Capital City. The Capital Film Academy has asked me to go for an interview. We need to hurry. In that case, you go on home and pack while I go buy the tickets." Grandma looked like she was about to hand her things over to Yi Tianxin and prepare to head out to the train station to buy the tickets. "Grandma, I've bought them already." Very softly, Yi Tianxin whispered, "I saved up all the money that you gave me. I didn't spend unnecessarily. Good girl." The ticket was for that afternoon at 1 o'clock. The pair went home to pack and then left for the train station. Between them, Yi Tianxin and her grandmother had very little luggage, just a change of clothes and the deposit book that showed no more than $50,000. Grandma had insisted Yi Tianxin bring the deposit book along with them. "Poor at home, rich on the road," her grandmother said, explaining that while it was all right for one to be poor in one's own home, one needed money at hand to feel secure when away from home. The train was arriving soon. Walking out of the train station, Yi Tianxin and her grandmother noticed rows and rows of young men standing at attention. "Grandma, let's join the end of the line." "Young lady." A man clad in a white t-shirt walked toward Yi Tianxin and asked, "Where are you going?" "Sorry, but I don't know you." Although she could tell he wasn't a bad guy, Yi Tianxin didn't feel that they were on familiar enough terms to engage in a friendly conversation. Looking embarrassed, Yange rubbed his head. "We've met before. In the emergency ward at the hospital that night. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Yange. Thank you for saving our boss." At Yange's introduction, a look of concern passed over Yi Tianxin's face, and she asked, "That guy, is he all right? Our boss is doing well, all because of your courageous act of donating blood to him. But due to the severity of his injuries, he has to recuperate for a long time. That's good." Yi Tianxin had barely stopped speaking when she heard the sound of the approaching train. Full of energy, Yange bellowed, "Make way please for the young lady and the elderly senior to board first." And that was how Yi Tianxin and her grandmother were sent onto the train by the group of young men. Since Yi Tianxin and her grandmother only had standing tickets, they didn't need to look for their seats. After they boarded the train, Yi Tianxin took her grandmother to the interconnecting section between the two train carriages. "Grandma, I'm sorry, but because of the short notice, I could only buy us standing tickets. Just bear with it and rest here. When we get to the next stop and someone gets off, I'll get you a seat." When she packed for their trip, Yi Tianxin, taking into consideration her grandmother's condition, had intentionally picked a soft bag that could be sat on and a thin blanket. "Young lady, I've been looking all over for you. Come, we can't let you sit here. Come with me." Looking a tad bashful, Yi Tianxin declined. "No, thank you. We're fine sitting here." When she bought their tickets, she'd been informed that there were no more allocated seats. Yi Tianxin knew that if she followed Yange's instructions, then he would be the one left without a seat. "No way." Yange noticed that Yi Tianxin had refused to budge. "Someone please help the old lady to our seat." At his command, Grandma was escorted by the friendly young men to a private car and seated comfortably. The entire car was filled with young men in the same uniform of polo shirts and pants. They were all seated upright and proper in neat rows, and looked full of life. When they were told by Yange that Tianxin had saved their team leader, they treated her with even more respect. "Young lady, I've asked the train conductor to transfer you once a sleeper becomes available." "Thank you so much." Now, Yi Tianxin wasn't someone who liked to be indebted to anyone. Yange consciously softened his expression and explained, "Young lady, you saved our team leader's life. You're our team leader's savior. That makes you our benefactor, so please don't stand on ceremony with us." That said, Yange turned to Yi Tianxin's grandmother and said, "Old madam, you've done an excellent job with this young lady's upbringing. Thank you." The advantage of sharing a private car with these young men was that Yi Tianxin and her grandmother didn't have to lift a finger to do anything. During mealtimes, the young men would even share their food with Yi Tianxin and her grandmother. When it was almost dark, the train conductor came by and informed Yange that 2 sleepers had become available. Carrying their luggage for them, Yange accompanied Yi Tianxin and her grandmother to the sleeper seats. One of the available sleepers was a lower bunk, and the other was a middle bunk. Having stored their luggage securely, Yange handed a piece of paper to Yi Tianxin, saying, "Young lady, Not being familiar with capital city, you might need assistance at some point. In that case, please call this number. Yi Tianxin carefully put the piece of paper away. It was better to be safe than sorry, although she hoped they wouldn't find cause to call them in capital city. Thank you, Yenge. Grinning, Yenge replied, It's been our pleasure to be at your service. Old madam, please rest up. It was only after Yenge had left that Yi Tianxin's grandmother looked at her and said, Tianxin, what did I say? Doing good has its rewards. Grandma, actually someone who looks like a bad person might not necessarily be a bad person, and someone who looks like a decent person might not necessarily be a good person. The reason why Yi Tianxin made that statement was because she'd been reminded of the devastating earthquake that would occur 2 years from now. The earthquake that shook the earth and shattered the mountains, shocking the entire nation. The citizens across the nation had stood as one, the people and the leaders united with one goal. They turned their pain and despair into the energy needed to rebuild and create a new home. Daily, at every mealtime, the meal car would automatically deliver meals to Yi Tianxin and her grandmother. Yi Tianxin found out, after asking the train conductor, that Yenge had paid for all their meals. Yi Tianxin made a note to herself that, if given a chance in the future, she would pay Yenge back for the money he'd spent on their meals. All thanks to Yenge, their journey of 2 days and 2 nights wasn't too unbearable. Also, her grandmother fared much better than Yi Tianxin had anticipated. At past 5 in the afternoon on March 16th, the train finally pulled into the capital train station. Yi Tianxin lugged her luggage with one hand and held onto her grandmother's hand with the other. As there was an especially huge crowd of people rushing out of the station, Yi Tianxin decided that she'd rather slow down than risk her grandmother being hurt by all the shoving and pushing. When they finally got through the exit, they noticed that there were people everywhere. Dusk set in, and the sky gradually darkened. The street lamps and neon lights lit up and shone brightly, enveloping the city in their light like a glamorous cloak. Grandma, let's first check into a hotel in the vicinity of the film academy. Yi Tianxin sought out the officers on duty near the train station and asked for directions to the bus station, where they hopped onto a bus. Grandma, take the seat. Since there was only one vacant seat on the bus, Yi Tianxin asked her grandmother to take it while she stood to the side, studying the bus route that was in front of her. After traveling for about an hour, they finally arrived at the Capital Film Academy stop. Yi Tianxin and her grandmother alighted from the bus. It was now totally dark. Grandma, let's get something to eat first, and then look for a place to stay, shall we? Sounds good. Coincidentally, not far from where they were, there was a noodle shop selling zhajiangmian. Yi Tianxin and her grandmother walked into the shop and ordered 2 bowls of zhajiangmian. Ma'am, I'd like to know if there are places of accommodation, like hotels, in the neighborhood? The lady proprietor was seated at a side table and was peeling garlic while watching TV. Young lady, you've come at a bad time. Since the folks at the Film Academy are starting their interviews, all the hotels and inns in the vicinity have long been booked. That figures, Yi Tianxin thought to herself. So, what should she do now? They couldn't possibly sleep on the streets. On her own, she could have roughed it out, but her grandmother was in no condition to rough it out and sleep on the streets. Then are there public baths in the neighborhood? Yes, on the street behind us. Thank you, ma'am. 2 bowls of zhajiangmian were delivered to their table. Although the servings weren't big, the sauce that came with the noodles was sweet and aromatic. Yi Tianxin reached for her grandmother's bowl first, pulling it toward her and mixing the noodles and the sauce with gusto before handing the bowl back to her grandmother. Grandma, try it. Is the zhajiangmian in capital city tasty? Or are the noodles in our hometown tastier? Her grandmother took a mouthful and found the noodles a tad salty. It wasn't a flavor that she was accustomed to. Ma'am, do you have spicy sauce? It's right there on the table. After adding some spicy sauce to the noodles in her bowl, Grandma began to eat more heartily. As she watched her grandmother from across the table, Yi Tianxin felt a surge of guilt in her heart. For a long period in her past life, she was extremely immature and selfish. And when she finally matured and gotten herself straightened out, her grandmother had already passed on. Now, with her grandmother still alive, she resolved to treat her better, much better. All she wanted was for her grandmother to be healthy and happy. If her grandmother was happy, she was happy too. She hoped her grandmother would live to a ripe old age and have everything going for her according to her wishes. Grandma, is it tasty? Nodding repeatedly, her grandmother replied, yes, it is. For her grandmother, who was used to the flavors and cooking methods of Yancheng, the fast food served on the train and the zhajiangmian clearly didn't taste like what she was accustomed to. However, being habitually thrifty, her grandmother would never waste food. So, even if the food wasn't appetizing by her standards, she'd still persevere and slowly finish it, not wasting a single morsel. Only people who've suffered and labored understand the value of food, treasuring every grain of rice and every stalk of vegetable. Grandma, in the future, when I have money, I'll buy you lots and lots of delicious food that you've never tasted before. Smiling, her grandmother nodded, looking especially kindly with her gently arched brows and warm eyes. Grandma, about that house in our hometown. Let's not sell it just yet.
Keep it.
Maybe one day my mother will come back. When Yi Tianxin mentioned her mother, her grandmother's eyes immediately darkened. Tianxin, I too believe that your mother will return one day. When that happens, the 3 of us will be happily reunited. So many years had gone by, and still her daughter hadn't come home. Grandma surmised that her daughter probably met with some mishap or passed away. Grandma, my mother will be fine. I want to believe that there'll be a miracle. When the grandmother and her granddaughter finished eating their zhajiangmian, they sat and rested a bit in the noodle house. Ma'am, how much do we owe you?
$20.
Yi Tianxin handed $20 over to the proprietor. Accepting the money, the proprietor asked, Young lady, are you here for the interviews at the Film Academy? Ma'am, how did you guess? At that question, the proprietor replied, Young lady, I've run this noodle house near the Film Academy for many years now and have many movie stars as regular customers. Look up at that wall. Do you know Qingxin? When Qingxin came in for her interview at the academy, she also ate zhajiangmian at our shop. Then she got accepted. Now, since you've eaten our zhajiangmian, you'll also make it. Then we hope that your prediction will come true, Grandma commented after she heard what the proprietor said. Old madam, your granddaughter is very pretty. She'll most definitely become a movie star. When that happens, you can expect to live well too. Live well. Yes, live well. Yi Tianxin and her granddaughter spent some time chatting with the proprietor. When the woman, a nice and friendly person, found out that Yi Tianxin and her grandmother had traveled here a long way by train, she recommended a hotel to them. Young lady, go to the bookshop on the next street and look for the proprietor Madame Du. If you're not fussy, you and your grandmother can tough it out and sleep in the loft above the bookshop for tonight. We can work something out after the first interview tomorrow. The wind in capital city was a little chilly. Yi Tianxin's cheeks stung a little as the wind blew against her face. With their luggage bag in one hand and her grandmother's hand in the other, Yi Tianxin noticed that the nightscape in capital city was breathtakingly radiant. She and her grandmother were now a part of the populous crowd of capital city. Grandma, once I'm done with the interviews, let's go climb the Great Wall? Her grandmother nodded happily. She had never left Jiaming in entire her life and had no idea that the world outside was like this. As it turned out, there were so many high-rise buildings in capital city. So many high-rise buildings that it was possible to count them. We're here. Yi Tianxin and her grandmother stood in front of the entrance to the bookshop. The shop looked a little dilapidated. The steps at its front door were adorned by many flower pots of different sizes and were filled with purple and red flowers in full bloom that danced gently in the night wind. Excuse me, is Madame Du in, please? Walking to the front of the bookshop, Yi Tianxin pushed open the wooden door, causing the wind chime behind it to ring crisply and melodiously. When Yi Tianxin and her grandmother walked into the bookshop, it felt as if they'd stepped into another world. The four walls of the bookshop were lined with books. On the sofa in the center of the room, a cheap-how-clad woman was napping under a lamp. She seemed to have been awoken by the sound of the wind chime, because she raised her head, a little startled, and looked toward the entrance of the bookshop. She noticed Yi Tianxin and her grandmother standing there. Can I help you? Hello, Ani, we were sent here by the proprietor of the zhajiangmian noodle shop out front. May I ask if you'd let me and my grandmother stay here for the night? Even as she spoke, Yi Tianxin felt that she was being too presumptuous. If she were on her own, she could have roughed it out anywhere for the night, but her grandmother wouldn't be able to bear it. Her grandmother was too old to rough it out and camp out in the open with her. Are you here for the examinations at the Film Academy?
Madame Du stood up.
She looked to be in excellent physical shape. Clad in a cheap how made of gamber silk, which accentuated her elegance and grace, she simply oozed charm. Yes, we arrived a little late and the proprietor informed us that all the hotels in the vicinity are full. I assume that you traveled here by train? Why don't you settle this old lady first and let her get some sleep? When you've done that, come downstairs to see me. At Madame Du's words, Yi Tianxin relaxed, feeling relieved. With help from Madame Du, she gave her grandmother a bath and took her upstairs to the loft, where she coaxed her to sleep. Grandma, you go ahead and sleep. I'm going to have a word with Madame Du afterward. I'll join you here. After Yi Tianxin showered, she went downstairs in a floral-patterned cotton dress. Although the dress was a few years old and therefore outdated in style, it didn't have an adverse effect on Yi Tianxin's beauty. In fact, the simpler outfit better accentuated her natural, flawless beauty. Young lady, what's your name? From your accent, I guess that you're from the southwestern region. Madame Du handed Yi Tianxin a cup of coffee, enticingly aromatic coffee served in an exquisitely designed coffee cup. My name is Yi Tianxin, and I'm from the town of Jiaming. This is my registered residence card. Yi Tianxin handed over her registered residence card. Since she was under 18, she didn't have an identity card. Also, the temporary ID that the school applied for en masse for the senior high students sitting the college entrance exams hadn't been approved yet. That was why Yi Tianxin and her grandmother had only brought along her registered residence card and grandma's identity card for this trip. Young lady, judging by the clothes and general appearance of both you and your grandmother, you don't seem to be wealthy people. Do you know that you'd need to set aside a lot of money to study at the Capital Film Academy? Can your family afford the hefty expense? Madame Du was being brutally honest. To an outsider, perhaps Yi Tianxin and her grandmother looked like the typical earthy, honest country folk. Going through the qualifying process for acceptance into the Capital Film Academy would be a very challenging task. Furthermore, once accepted, the ensuing expenses would be extremely high. Madame Du, my primary goal is to gain acceptance into Capital University. If I get accepted into Capital University, the town, county, and city offices will grant me bursaries to help with the expenses. Actually, the real purpose of my coming here for the interviews with Capital Film Academy is because I want to send my grandmother to the Capital First Hospital for a medical checkup. Yi Tianxin somehow didn't need to hold back with Madame Du and was very frank and open with her. Or perhaps it was the cultured and scholarly ambience in the bookstore that caused Yi Tianxin to lower her inhibitions for the first time since her rebirth. I've lived with my grandmother since I was very young. We only have each other. My grandmother recently collapsed, and I'm concerned about the effectiveness of the medical facilities and their conditions where we live. That's why I'm using this chance to bring my grandmother here for a medical checkup.
Madame Du, don't worry.
My grandmother and I aren't bad people. At Yi Tianxin's response, Madame Du's eyes flashed. She slowly stood up. As she looked tenderly at Yi Tianxin, her eyes radiated tranquility, like gently flowing spring water. Yi Tianxin, you should get some rest. You need to get up early tomorrow for your interview. I wish you success. Madame Du smiled sincerely as she spoke. Sometimes, interpersonal relationships are cultivated from a mutual liking for each other. Perhaps it was Yi Tianxin's filial piety toward her grandmother that had impressed Madame Du, convincing her of her good character, that she didn't seem to mind letting Yi Tianxin stay at her bookshop, giving her full access to her shop. Madame Du, since I won't be able to bring my grandmother along for the interview tomorrow, could she wait for me in the shop, please?
Of course she can.
So, good night then, Yi Tianxin. That said, Madame Du proceeded to leave her shop without a second thought, leaving it in Yi Tianxin's hands. She opened the door and disappeared into the quiet night. Yi Tianxin went up to the loft. Her grandmother, who hadn't yet fallen asleep, opened her eyes when she heard Yi Tianxin come in. Tianxin, what did the shop owner say? She agreed to let us stay here temporarily. Grandma, I have to go to the academy tomorrow for my interview. You just stay here and wait for me while I'm gone. Afterward, we'll go further afield to look for accommodation. All right. Grandma looked at Yi Tianxin's face, which radiated beauty like a rose in full bloom, and suddenly felt deep down in her heart that Yi Tianxin had aged. On their journey here, she clearly saw that Yi Tianxin had changed into a very responsible person who was organized and dependable. She wondered if perhaps it was because she had had to make a living for them both and hadn't had the time to give Tianxin the care that she needed that had caused Tianxin to grow up prematurely. Grandma, get some sleep. As it was their first night in an unfamiliar environment, neither Yi Tianxin nor her grandmother was able to sleep soundly. It was barely dawn when Yi Tianxin quietly got up. Since Madame Du had so kindly offered them a place to stay, she couldn't possibly repay her kindness by sleeping in until she arrived at the shop. Once out of bed, Yi Tianxin set about quietly cleaning the shop, making as little noise as possible. She used water to wipe down the bookshelves and every inch of the floorboards, paying attention to every single detail. Rising a short while after Yi Tianxin, her grandmother helped to water the flowering plants outside the shop and swept away the fallen leaves at the shop entrance. When Madame Du arrived, she was greeted with a picture of sparkling tidiness. She was holding a wash basin in one hand and a bag containing pork dumplings and a few buns in the other. Ma'am, you've been working too hard. Grandma replied gently, not at all. If you hadn't kindly taken us in, my granddaughter and I would have had to sleep on the streets. Madame Du and Grandma walked into the shop. Yi Tianxin, fresh from the shower, was dressed in a white dress patterned with tiny blue flowers. With her shiny black hair braided into two long plaits, she looked exceptionally charming, like a little fairy. Grandma, wait here for me while I go out and buy breakfast for you. Clad in her signature qipao, Madame Du said, I brought you some breakfast. Just eat these for now since you don't have a lot of time to spare.
Ye Tianjin tanket her repeatedly.
After she and her grandmother had breakfast, Yi Tianxin left the shop with her simple but worn backpack. Watching Yi Tianxin's energetic figure walk away, Madame Du suddenly had a thought, a feeling that perhaps this was her. It was like the character that she had created with her pen had come alive and walked out of the book. It was her. She had finally found her. She had found the female lead who could play the role in that particular movie. The person in her imagination had come to life. She'd resigned herself to the fact that she'd never find someone in her lifetime to play that part. Without a suitable person to play it, she'd rather not shoot the movie at all. When Yi Tianxin got to the academy, there was already a large crowd of people milling about at the entrance gates. The crowd consisted of applicants who'd come for the interviews and some of their parents. With much difficulty, Yi Tianxin squeezed her way through the crowd and past the entrance gates into the academy. She then went to join the line at the recruitment office for an assessment pass. The other girls waiting in line were of varying shapes and sizes and were all dressed to the nines in attractive outfits. On the other hand, the bare-faced Yi Tianxin, standing amidst these prettily made-up girls without a trace of makeup on her face, was like a breath of fresh air. Having obtained her pass, Yi Tianxin left the recruitment office, followed the instructions on the signposts to the classroom designated for the interview, and waited outside for her name to be called. Thanks to the immense popularity of Qingxin across the entire nation, every recruitment drive at Capital Film Academy had attracted numerous applications. Yi Tianxin sat on the bench outside the classroom and waited for her turn. She'd only just sat down when a girl who'd been sitting there got up, a look of undisguised revulsion on her face. Yi Tianxin glanced at her and decided that it'd be really unbelievable if she made it past the first interview in that outfit. Her hair was colored red, orange, green, black, blue, and purple. She wore a white vest paired with an ethnic-styled long skirt, her belly button exposed. With her collagen-filled face painted a variety of colors, she looked very much like a non-mainstream type of person that people gossiped about. Yi Tianxin was feeling thankful that, due to the remote inland location of Jiaming, she'd never been inclined to experiment with this non-mainstream fad, not even at the height of her youthful rebellion. Perhaps it was because this girl and Yi Tianxin were both dressed relatively outlandishly that the other people around them didn't seem to pay much attention to the non-mainstream girl. Feeling bored, the non-mainstream girl sat down beside Yi Tianxin. She took one look at her old-fashioned dress and the white trainers that had been washed umpteen times and spoke daintily. Hey, did you come from a farm? In your village, are you like the village queen? Farm? Village queen? At the girl's questions, Yi Tianxin raised her head and smiled sweetly. What's a village queen? She asked. I don't understand what you mean. It's like the prettiest girl in the village, you know? Since you're here to apply for admittance to the film academy, shouldn't you have bought yourself a nicer outfit? Just look at you, dressed in such outmoded clothes. You definitely won't get past the first interview. Having said her piece, the girl extracted a small mirror from her bag and peered into it, carefully checking her appearance. A short while later, the girl, while continuing to admire herself in the mirror, murmured to herself, I thank my parents for giving me such a pretty face. Upon hearing that, Yi Tianxin actually felt like laughing, but instead she merely shut her eyes and waited in silence for her turn. After some time, a teacher walked out of the classroom and read out the pass numbers.
Número 99, número 100.
Come in, please. Number 99, that was Yi Tianxin's pass number. Holding her pass, Yi Tianxin walked into the classroom, while number 100 followed and also entered the classroom. At that moment, Yi Tianxin glanced at number 100, who was right behind her, and froze in shock. Isn't she Li Qingcang?
She.
Why was she applying for admittance to the film academy? Li Qingcang was wearing a long white dress, and her hair was loose and cascaded down to her tiny waist. Her petite face was lightly made up to cleverly highlight the most attractive features of her face. Number 100, come over here and have your makeup removed. Number 99, start preparing for your performance. Yi Tianxin took a long, deep breath. Meeting her archenemy so unexpectedly at this time had, without a doubt, somewhat affected her mood. At first, all Yi Tianxin wanted was to use the interview at Capital Film Academy as an excuse to send her grandmother for a medical checkup. But now, seeing Li Qingcang here, all the hurts and grievances that she had suffered in her past life once again flooded her heart. The feeling of injustice, hatred, anger, and despair instantly took control of all her senses. Acting time. Yi Tianxin walked outside, her face beaming with happiness. She could see her car in the distance, surrounded by a large group of people. Very quickly, she tore her way through the crowd of onlookers and saw some emergency services personnel in the distance preparing to force open the car window. Yi Tianxin walked over to them and asked, Excuse me, what's going on here? When the car door was forced open, a child's face could be seen. Shocked to her very core, Yi Tianxin's legs gave way, and she immediately fell to the ground. Reaching out, she touched the child's scorching hot skin and was so traumatized that she shook uncontrollably. Her lips moved, but she was unable to make a single sound. Her eyes transformed into pools of scary emptiness. Yi Tianxin's little sketch was a solo act. However, she effectively presented the many facets of the scene, giving it dimension and exceptional depth. The emotions of happiness, confusion, fear, horror, and hopelessness were all portrayed through her subtle facial expressions. All three inspectors were instantly drawn into the scene, even though there wasn't another person acting opposite Yi Tianxin. From the minute details of Yi Tianxin's facial expressions and her body language, the inspectors could discern the context of the brief scene. Inspectors, my performance is over. Yi Tianxin rose from the floor, her face reverting to its normal expression. There was speechless admiration on the faces of all three admittance inspectors. In unison, without hesitation, they made a small red check next to Yi Tianxin's name on their respective lists. Waiting off to the side, Li Qingxin had completely removed her makeup. In a graceful manner, holding a valuable violin in her hand, she stepped forward to face the inspectors. Hello, inspectors. My name is Li Qingxin, and I'm 16 years old. I come from Shanghai City, and I'm here to play the Butterfly Lovers for you. Standing in position, Li Qingxin began to play. She'd learned to play the violin from a young age, and was confident that her performance would impress the inspectors. Off to the side, Yi Tianxin watched Li Qingxin's performance. This wasn't the first time she'd seen Li Qingxin perform. In her past life, after Lu Jijuan took her back to the Lu family, Li Qingxin always treated her well, introducing her to fashionable trends and glamour. Naively, Yi Tianxin believed that Li Qingxin was a good younger sister. Ironically, it was only when she was on the verge of death that she realized how much her good younger sister hated her. She hated Yi Tianxin with such intensity that she wanted her to lose everything that she'd ever possessed: reputation, wealth, status, love, everything. She hated Tianxin so much that she devised a scheme for her son to die in such an awful manner. Yi Tianxin looked at Li Qingxin with neither appreciation nor amazement at her talent. Instead, her eyes emanated calm, much like the quiet stillness of the sea on a windless day, a tranquil picture of blue skies and jade-green water. Except that, in the deeper depths of the ocean, impenetrable even by the light, an intense hatred that would cause mass destruction was gradually building up. Thank you, inspectors. My performance is over. The three inspectors reviewed Li Qingcang's particulars in the papers before them, and the one seated in the middle asked, Lu, your violin performance is of a professional standard. You must have started learning the violin when you were very young. Why would you want to apply for admittance to the film academy? It was obvious that Li Qingcang hadn't expected the inspectors to ask her that. Smiling sweetly, she replied, Sir, Qingxin is my idol. I want to be able to play a character similar to Qingxin. Lu, to a professional actor, the nationwide popularity that an actor like Qingxin has enjoyed is extremely rare. For a long period of time after first starting out in this profession, a majority of actors have to be extras in scenes or take on roles like the maidservant, the baddie, or an insignificant scene filler. For someone like you, who plays the violin at such a high level, you could very well pursue the path of a professional violinist. A trace of confusion flashed in Li Qingxin's eyes. She'd assumed that her violin performance would most definitely seal the deal for her and get her accepted into the film academy. Inspectors, how about this? Let me put on another performance for you. The three inspectors looked at one another, communicating with their eyes, and ultimately agreed to her suggestion. However, because the inspectors had just experienced Yi Tianxin's excellent acting skills, which were reminiscent of the actor's teaching manual, Li Qingxin's acting skills appeared stiff and paled in comparison. Yi Tianxin had set the bar high, so Li Qingxin's performance naturally didn't live up to the inspectors' expectations. That's it then. Number 99 and number 100, you've completed the preliminary interview. In 3 days, please check the notice board at the main gate for the applicants shortlisted for the second interview. Yi Tianxin and Li Qingxin left the classroom together. Li Qingxin looked at Yi Tianxin, who had walked ahead of her, her eyes flashing with a faint gleam of hatred. When they went down the stairs, Li Qingxin pushed Yi Tianxin down the steps. Yi Tianxin, who'd been mentally prepared for this, simply nimbly flitted down the stairs. On the other hand, Li Qingxin, who'd wanted to harm her, missed a step and fell down the stairs. Fortunately, with only 3 steps, the stairs weren't that high, so a tumble down the steps wouldn't cause any serious injury. Ouch! Li Qingxin tumbled down past the last step. Standing to the side, Yi Tianxin looked concerned as she asked, Number 100, what happened? I lost my balance and fell down the stairs. Can you help me up, please? Li Qingxin looked up at Yi Tianxin with tears in her eyes. Without hesitating, Yi Tianxin reached out and helped Li Qingxin to her feet. Thank you. Yi Tianxin supported Li Qingxin as they walked toward the main gate of the film academy. In the distance, not far from the main gate, Yi Tianxin noted that Yancheng was waiting and watching by the gate. When he saw Li Qingxin, he had wanted to rush into the grounds toward her. However, since the security guards refused to let him through, Yancheng had to wait until Yi Tianxin helped Li Qingxin to the gate before he could take over and help Li Qingxin. Qingxin, what happened? Are you hurt? As evidenced by the look in his eyes, Yancheng was genuinely worried about Li Qingxin and didn't even glance at Yi Tianxin. When Li Qingxin saw Yancheng, tears started spilling down her cheeks as she cried, Yancheng, my leg hurts. Concerned, Yancheng stooped to inspect Li Qingxin's injured ankle. Qingxin, I think you've injured your leg. I'll take you to the hospital. Okay. Li Qingxin leaned against Yancheng and said, Yancheng, what about her? When she heard her name mentioned, Yi Tianxin's defense mechanisms kicked in, and she looked suspiciously at Li Qingxin. What was she scheming now? Was she planning to frame her? Was it you who caused her injury? Let me tell you, you'd better pray that Qingxin will be all right. Otherwise, I'll sue you and take you to the cleaners. Yancheng had immediately picked up on the insinuation in Li Qingxin's unfinished sentence. In that instant, Yi Tianxin suddenly understood the relationship between Li Qingxin and Yancheng. Look, mister. Your girlfriend took a tumble because she was careless. Since she wasn't able to walk, I, out of the goodness of my heart, helped her to the gate. Despite that, you want to sue me and take me to the cleaners? Do you think just because I come from a small town, I don't know the law? Tears streaming down her pretty face, Li Qingxin tugged at Yancheng's clothes and whined, Yancheng, you're mistaken. In one swift movement, Yancheng picked Li Qingxin up in his arms. He gave Yi Tianxin, who was standing to the side, a fleeting glance before lowering his head to console Li Qingxin in a gentle voice. Qingxin, does it hurt badly? Don't be scared. I'm going to take you to the hospital. All Yancheng cared about at that moment was Li Qingxin's slightly swollen ankle. He hadn't even noticed what kind of person Yi Tianxin was. After he walked away a few steps, he seemed to remember Yi Tianxin and, standing at a distance of about 3 meters from her, said emotionlessly, sorry. Yancheng and Li Qingxin then left the scene. Yi Tianxin's heart sank to the lowest depths. In her past life, she'd always assumed that the reason why Yancheng treated her so coldly was because she wasn't good enough for him. It wasn't until now, after she'd stepped back from the situation and looked at it from an outsider's perspective, that she finally realized without a doubt in her mind that the reason why he had treated her like that wasn't because she wasn't good enough. It was because he wasn't in love with her. He had done all those things to her in her past life because he wasn't in love with her. Yi Tianxin laughed bitterly at her own foolishness and naivety. She turned around and started walking in the direction of the bookshop. She and Gu Yancheng were like travelers on parallel paths, walking away from each other in opposite directions. Back at the bookshop, she saw her grandmother chatting with Madame Du. Tianxin, how was it? When she saw Yi Tianxin enter the bookshop, Grandma anxiously walked toward her. Helping her grandmother to the rocking chair, Yi Tianxin replied, Grandma, it's still too early to tell. The inspector said the list of shortlisted applicants will be posted on the notice board at the main gate 3 days from now, and to check back then. Grandma was very uneasy at the thought of having to stay in capital city for 3 more days. However, mindful that this was about Yi Tianxin's life, she decided that she should bear it for her granddaughter's sake. Although Madame Du had kindly allowed her and her grandmother to stay in the bookshop the night before, Yi Tianxin felt that they should look for a place to stay that afternoon. She'd feel terrible if they inconvenienced Madame Du any further. Annie Du, thank you for being so kind and letting us stay here last night. In a short while, I'm going to go out and look for another place to stay. Madame Du smiled warmly, her slender brows perfectly complementing her dazzling eyes. She was as graceful as a beautiful orchid. Madame Du was in her early 40s, but her face was exquisitely made up, and she looked great. However, her side profile was especially attractive. You don't need to go look for a place to stay. Coincidentally, in the near future, I'm going to have to go away to attend to some matters, so you guys should just stay here at the bookshop on a temporary basis. Madame Du got up from her seat and led Yi Tianxin and her grandmother to the yard at the back of the bookshop. It was only when they got to the backyard that Yi Tianxin discovered actually there was a whole other space back there. Madame Du was undoubtedly a woman who loved and lived life passionately. She opened the connecting door between the bookshop and the backyard, presenting to them a small garden of flowering plants, shrubs, and trees. Since it was spring, the flowering plants constantly gave off the fragrance of spring. Located at the back of the shop was a small double-story house. Perhaps because it hadn't been lived in for a long period of time, the little house looked a little dilapidated. Tianxin, you and your grandmother would need to tidy this place up and make it livable. And if you want to cook your own meals, you might need to buy some kitchenware. Liking the place at first sight, Yi Tianxin looked with delight at Madame Du. Thank you, Annie Du. There's no need to thank me. If you were not here, I would have to close the bookshop every time I need to go away on business. Don't even think about paying me rent. I also won't pay you a salary. Yi Tianxin was moved to tears. As a visitor in a strange city, she felt very blessed to have met such a kind person. Madame Du's kindness filled Yi Tianxin's heart with warmth, like the balmy spring air. Annie Du, you're a good person. Let me buy you dinner tonight. Yi Tianxin was so touched that she became a tad emotional. The fact that they were able to stay in a double-story house in capital city made Yi Tianxin feel as if she'd won the national lottery. Sure thing. Why don't you start cleaning up the place? This place hasn't been lived in all this time, and I'm not sure if some of these items are still usable. If they aren't usable, just leave them outside, and I'll send someone over to collect them for disposal. Okay. Her grandmother offered to help her clean up, but Yi Tianxin didn't need her help. Yi Tianxin found a basin and a rag and started cleaning up with gusto. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the structure of the sturdily built 2-story house. However, because it hadn't been lived in for a very long time, the furniture and fittings were covered in layers of dust. Yi Tianxin became engrossed in her cleaning that she lost track of time. Fortunately, Madame Du had ordered some takeout to be delivered to the house. Tianxin, stop working for now, and come and eat something. At Madame Du's words, Yi Tianxin felt a little embarrassed and responded, Madame Du, you should eat first. Madame Du, who was standing at the doorway, looking inside, noticed that Yi Tianxin was a fast and efficient worker, as the house looked like it was close to being fit to live in. You're really a fast worker, she commented. I just did some general cleaning and tidying around the house.
Yi Tianxin similet sehelia.
Being busy meant staying focused on the task at hand, and it didn't leave time for her mind to dwell on useless thoughts. It was 1 in the afternoon by the time Yi Tianxin and her grandmother sat down in the yard to eat lunch. It was a beautiful day. The sun's warming rays shone upon them, making them feel comforted and cozy. Yi Tianxin looked at Madame Du, who was sitting beside her. Under the sun's rays, Madame Du's Gambier silk qipao seemed to radiate dancing rays of light. In that instant, Yi Tianxin suddenly felt sad as she thought of her mother. In her mother's generation, there were only black and white photographs, and she only had one photo of her. However, that one photo had been misplaced. To this date, Yi Tianxin had no memory or picture of her mother whatsoever. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she wouldn't be able to recognize her own mother, even if she were standing right in front of her. At that moment, however, looking at Madame Du, Yi Tianxin found herself wishing with all her heart that Madame Du was her mother. She dearly wanted someone to lean on, but, more than ever, she hoped that her grandmother could see her own daughter again before she passed on. Grandma, I'm going to the market to buy something later. Her grandmother's clothes also looked a little shabby and old. Yi Tianxin wanted to buy her grandmother some new clothes and pretty her up for their visit to the hospital the next day. I'm coming with you. Grandma, we need to make a few bus transfers to get to the market. It might get complicated, and since I'll be busy carrying stuff after we go there, I might not be able to take care of you as well. How about this? Can you stay home and help me with the laundry instead? All right. Grandma knew very well that she might get lost in this big city because of the huge crowds of people. If that happened, and with her being illiterate, she would only be an added burden to Yi Tianxin. Smiling sweetly, Yi Tianxin said, Grandma, I'm going to do some grocery shopping. Let's cook up some delicious jamming food for Annie. You'll be the chef, and I'll be your sous chef, okay? Okay. Her grandmother was an elderly woman. It would only make her feel useless and uneasy if she didn't give her any tasks to do. Yi Tianxin wanted to give her grandmother some easy tasks to be in charge of so that the old lady felt like she was still needed. So please tell me what ingredients I need to buy. Let me get my notebook to write them down so I don't forget anything. Observing this interaction between Yi Tianxin and her grandmother, Madame Du was reminded of her own daughter, who had died in infancy. If her daughter hadn't died, she would have been about Yi Tianxin's age about now. Would she have been as considerate, obedient, kind, and filial as Tianxin? Pork belly, preserved vegetables, red bean paste, onions, garlic, ginger, star anise, fennel, ribs, glutinous rice. Although Grandma had a strong jamming accent, Madame Du was able to understand her. That morning, while Yi Tianxin was at her interview, they had whiled away the time chatting in the bookshop. Madame Du increasingly realized that Yi Tianxin's grandmother was a remarkable woman. Despite the complete radio silence from her own daughter for more than a decade, Grandma had raised her granddaughter on her own. She was a wonderful woman who should be respected and lauded for her unconditional love. Grandma, anything else? Yi Tianxin again repeated the list of items that her grandmother had asked her to buy. Grandma listened intently before adding one more item. Chili bean paste. Oh, that's right. That's the most important ingredient. I'd almost forgotten about it. Chili bean paste was a key ingredient in jiaoming delicacy. Omitting it was the same as leaving out the soul of a jiaoming delight. Right then, I'll head out now. Yi Tianxin gathered up the takeout boxes and put them in a bag, planning to dispose of them in the trash bin on her way out. Yi Tianxin's grandmother, worried that Yi Tianxin might not have enough money on her, held onto Yi Tianxin's hand while she pulled out a little cloth pouch from her pocket. She called it a cloth pouch, but it was actually a handkerchief that she'd used to wrap some money in. Grandma shoved the pouch of cash directly into Yi Tianxin's hand. When you're on the road, don't rush or panic. Be careful and don't get hurt. If you see any dresses that you like, just buy yourself a few, she went on. Clutching the pouch, Yi Tianxin just kept nodding, holding back tears. It wasn't until she had boarded the bus that she allowed her tears to stream down her face. Like a child, she buried her head into her folded arms and cried out all the pain she had suppressed in her heart. Young lady, what happened? Are you hurt? Feeling unwell? A kind elderly man seated next to Yi Tianxin handed her a tissue. Yi Tianxin raised her head and looked at the elderly man, her face streaked with tears. Sir, I'm not hurt or unwell. Thank you. But if she had to tell him exactly where she was hurting, she would probably tell him that it was her heart that hurt her. The premature and unexpected appearance of Gu Yancheng and Li Qingcang had disturbed her tranquil state of mind like a rock thrown into a lake, creating wave after wave of ripples. Looking out of the window of the bus, she saw a forest of high-rise buildings. In this world, everyone was in a hurry. Every person worked hard, running around to make a life for themselves. All except her, who was making every effort to get her grandmother to live longer, even if just for one more day. Yi Tianxin's first stop was the hospital, where she inquired about the process for registration and other related matters. Then, using her grandmother's ID card, she made an appointment for a consultation. That done, she took the bus to a nearby market, where she bought the ingredients that her grandmother had asked for and some new clothes for her grandmother before taking the bus back to the bookshop. After she arrived at the bookshop this time, Yi Tianxin stood at the entrance and looked up. She saw a wooden signboard on which a supersized version of the character Du had been written with an ink brush.
Madame Du est surnommée was Du.
But Madame definitely wasn't her real name. Perhaps she had a real name. And if so, what was her real name? Are you Duan's daughter? Just as she was about to push open the door to the bookshop, Yi Tianxin heard a man's voice. Turning around, she saw a man standing at the bottom of the steps, a startled expression on his handsome face. It was him. He was the grandmaster of the movie world. Every single actress that he had supported and worked with had gone on to become international movie queens. Any actress who had starred in his movies would, in addition to their given names, be given another name, Golden Girl. You're mistaken. I'm not Duan's daughter. Yi Tianxin went out on a limb and guessed that the Duan the super director had referred to was in fact Madame Du. She had such a beautiful name, Duan, so why did the proprietor at the noodle shop call her Madame Du? Oh, it's my mistake. Qingxin appraised Yi Tianxin from head to toe. On her face, which was devoid of makeup, he noticed ruby red lips, white teeth, black, luscious, naturally shaped brows, and a pair of almond-shaped eyes that shone like the stars in the galaxy, radiating rays of brilliance. Her simple cotton dress with a floral print was extremely old-fashioned. Despite all that, however, she appeared elegant and very relaxed. Auntie Du should be in the shop. Please follow me inside. Qingxin and Yi Tianxin stepped into the bookshop. Qingxin was stunned when he entered the bookshop and looked around. It was obvious from his reaction that he hadn't expected Duan to be living out her days in a place like this. On second thought, he felt that this was exactly something he should have expected from Duan. She wasn't exactly a conventional person. Yi Tianxin pushed open the wooden door, causing the wind chime hanging behind it to make a melodious sound. Excuse me. Please wait here for a moment while I go find Dandy Do. Holding her bag, Yi Tianxin went through the bookshop to the yard at the back. Du-won was basking in the warm spring sunshine, reading a book. Annie Do, you have a visitor waiting outside. Oh, really? I'll go take a look. Du-won put her book down on the chair and walked into the bookshop. Seeing Du-won, Qingxin smiled and said, I say, Du, so this is where you've been living in seclusion? Shutting out the big bad world, smack in the middle of a city. If you hadn't taken the initiative to call me, I would have assumed that you'd taken off with a man. Looking resentful, Du-won glared at Qingxin. Master Jean, why do you still like spouting rubbish? I called you because I wanted to inform you that we can start shooting the movie Red Cherry because I found a young girl who's perfect for the role of Cherry. You just met her. What do you think? Du-won pulled out a bottle of chilled beer from the fridge and handed it to Qingxin. Qingxin replied, she does have Cherry's spirit. However, I'm not sure if she'd be able to successfully portray her. As you know, Cherry is a multifaceted character with a wide range of emotions. She wouldn't do justice to Cherry's cleverly written script if she couldn't act out the character's depth and breadth of emotions. Du-won was silent for a short while, deep in thought, then she replied, her childhood is similar to Cherry's. In fact, from a certain perspective, you could say that she would practically be playing herself in the movie. Also, I asked someone to find out on my behalf how she fared in her first interview at the Film Academy. Apparently, they're calling her a rare discovery. They say she's a promising young talent who's been blessed by the heavens and is destined to become an actress. Master Jean, I finished the script a long time ago for this film, but I've held back on shooting it because I couldn't find a suitable actor to play the part of Cherry. But now that I've found the perfect person for the lead part, I want to proceed with the production of the film. I want to see this movie completed and screened to the world while I'm still alive. Qingxin retrieved a packet of cigarettes from his bag. He extracted one stick and placed it between his lips, but just as he was about to light it up, he had second thoughts and silently put the cigarette back in the packet. Our esteemed screenwriter Du, I'm fully aware of how much you value this script. Years ago, when I had wanted to start shooting this movie, you steadfastly refused, and now you're suddenly pushing for me to start shooting this movie as soon as possible. How do you expect me to find an investor to fund this movie with such notice? By the looks of the script, Red Cherry was an art film, not a profitable commercial film. So, even with both of their strong reputations, the odds of them finding an investor were low. I'll fund it myself, Du-won said. It was her script. She had selected the female lead herself, and she didn't want an investor interfering with her movie. Most importantly, she didn't want an investor pushing actors into the film who didn't fit and lowering the movie's overall quality. How are you going to fund it? Qingxin felt that Du-won had gone a little crazy. This movie had many city scenes in it, which meant it wouldn't be a cheap movie to film and would need a lot of funding. Furthermore, and this was the single most important point of all, the movie wouldn't be a box office hit, since the story was about the life of a character who represented only a small segment of the population. I plan to mortgage my real estate properties. I already did a rough estimate, and expect I'll be able to raise close to $50 million from my assets. Du-won, after having given it some serious thought, had concluded that the only way she'd be able to have the most control over how the movie was produced was if she herself was the movie's biggest investor. No way, Du-won. You're crazy. Don't you even realize what type of movie this is? It doesn't matter how great the script is. If no one goes to the cinema to watch the movie, you'll lose everything.
Du-won laughed softly at Yancheng.
Our life in this world is short, merely a few decades. Money and assets are just material things, stuff that we didn't have coming into this world and stuff that we won't be able to take with us when we die, so it doesn't really matter to me if I lose everything. Well, I still have to think about it. Although Qingxin said that he still needed to think about it, he was already running through a list of potential actors in his head. Which actor would be a good fit for the male lead? He had met Yi Tianxin at the shop entrance earlier. From what he'd seen of her, he estimated that she was at least 1.7 meters tall. If she was going to be the female lead, then the male lead definitely had to be no shorter than 1.8 meters tall because they couldn't possibly make the male lead stand on a box while shooting the scenes he and Yi Tianxin were in together. I just knew that you'd agree to do this.
Du-won stood up.
Although she was no longer a young woman in her early 20s, she still missed the good old days of her youth whenever she thought about them. I'm going to head back now. As the director, I have to personally oversee many things pertaining to the film's production. As for the female lead, are you sure she has the acting skills to pull it off? We need a real actor, not an ornamental vase. On the big screen, a woman who lacks acting skills is like a wooden beauty. It adversely affects the film and makes it bland. Qingxin did some calculations in his head. If he added his assets to Du-won's investment, would that be sufficient enough money for them to fund the production of the movie? Fortunately, the female lead was a newbie and wouldn't be able to command a huge fee for her role. Because of that, maybe they should only hire newbies for the film. Why don't you stay and have dinner with us and try what Yi Tianxin and her grandmother are cooking for us for dinner tonight? All right then. Qingxin didn't think it would make that much of a difference if stayed here with them for a little while longer instead of going back right away. Returning to the yard, Du-won noted that Grandma and Yi Tianxin had finished prepping the food and were ready to start steaming it.
Mom, Tianxin.
I have a friend who's going to join us for dinner. Is that okay with you? Grandma nodded and replied, of course. As the sous chef, Yi Tianxin, wearing an apron, stood to the side and awaited instructions, her profile partially lit by the lights above her. There she was, standing to the side, and the lights above her, like an excellent stage prop, covered her in a golden sheen. Soon, the enticing aroma of food wafted out from the kitchen, causing Qingxin, who was seated in the bookshop, to salivate involuntarily. Outside, the sky gradually darkened. Duan walked to a nearby store to buy some beer. As far as she was concerned, today was a day for celebration, so she closed the bookshop earlier than normal. She and Qingxin went through the bookshop and into the little house at the back. There, they saw a simple round table covered with a checked tablecloth and 4 foldable chairs propped around it. Grandma had prepared the traditional cuisine of Jiameng, commonly called the 8 great bowls.
Knifed meatballs.
A combination of lean and fatty meat that's minced together with tofu and a variety of flavorings before being shaped in the palm of the hand into little triangles, which are thicker at one end than the other. The triangles are then laid out in a ring following the inside contour of a bowl, the thinner ends facing inward. Then, the center of the bowl is filled with layers of vegetables, such as dried lily petals, black fungus, and carrots, before it's put in the steamer. Dragon's eye. Pork belly sliced thickly and spread with pre-cooked red bean paste before being rolled into meat rolls. Crushed brown sugar is scattered in a bowl, and into this bowl, the meat rolls are placed in 3 rows. Then, cooked glutinous rice is ladled onto the meat rolls. The 8 great bowls referred to 8 different types of steamed food: savory and sweet, spicy and tart. And so, the 8 monster-sized bowls were laid out on the dining table. Under the lights, they looked enticingly delectable. Ma'am, did you and Tianxin make all this wonderful food? You must have worked really hard. Duan's gaze fell on a plate of crispy peanuts. She concluded that Grandma was indeed a thoughtful person, and that only someone as kind as Grandma was capable of raising a good, lovely girl like Yi Tianxin. No trouble at all. Please come and taste the food, you guys. Taking a seat beside Duan, Qingxin poured a glass of beer and handed it to Grandma. Grandma repeatedly shook her hand, saying, "Please help yourself. I don't drink." "Yes, please help yourself, sir. My grandmother doesn't drink at all." Qingxin picked up a piece of dragon's meat with his chopsticks and placed it in the bowl in front of him. The meat was steamed to perfection, and it fell apart when he picked it up. In his mouth, he could taste the subtle, fragrant glutinous rice and the mushy red beans. The many perfectly balanced layers of flavor and texture were amazing. "Ma'am, you're an excellent cook. You could stay and open a restaurant right here in Capital City." Hearing Qingxin compliment her grandmother on her cooking skills, Yi Tianxin was over the moon, even more so than if she'd been the one Qingxin had complimented. "Uncle, my grandmother couldn't possibly open a restaurant," she said. "Managing a restaurant is extremely tiring." Duan glanced smugly at Qingxin as if to say, "See what I mean? The person I've set my sights on is a really good person." Grandma was very grateful to Duan for her kindness in letting her and her granddaughter stay at the shop. But, because she was simple and honest, she wouldn't be able to rest easy until she repaid Duan's kindness. That was why Grandma kept persuading Qingxin and Duan to eat the food, 8 great bowls full, that she'd made on her own. However, she didn't use her own chopsticks to serve them, knowing that people in the city didn't like to be too familiar with one another. Qingxin took a quick glance at the floor and noticed that the formerly dilapidated floor was now neat and tidy because of Yi Tianxin's excellent job cleaning. Yi Tianxin had moved a few pots of flowers and put them in every corner of the house. Under the brilliance of the lighting, these flowers seemed to come alive. "Tianxin, what are your plans for the future?" Qingxin asked. "To get accepted into Capital University," Yi Tianxin replied sweetly. "Capital University?" Stunned, Qingxin looked at Duan and suddenly doubted Duan's decision to cast her as the lead. If Yi Tianxin was determined to get accepted into Capital University, should they even consider casting her for the role? "Do you have a profession that you're interested in?" At first, Yi Tianxin's goal had simply been to get accepted into Capital University. She hadn't given much thought to what profession she'd want to pursue, the reason being that, with her score, she couldn't afford to be picky about what field to specialize in. However, now that Qingxin had raised the question, she was suddenly reminded of someone she'd seen on TV. At the time, she'd thought it'd be an excellent choice in career, if she could do the job well, and was given the opportunity. "I want to be a foreign affairs officer." Yi Tianxin imagined herself as a representative of her country, standing in front of a press conference and elegantly and knowledgeably responding to questions from people about her country. Qingxin looked at Yi Tianxin. Her brows were picture-perfect, and her eyes were filled with energy and spirit. One look at a girl like that, and it'd be impossible for anyone not to like her. In fact, at that very moment, Qingxin found himself thinking that he hoped this girl would be successful in everything that she wanted to do in life. "Qingxin, your ambition is laudable," Duan said, looking seriously at Yi Qingxin. "When I was a kid, my greatest dream was to become a writer, because then I could sell my words for money and free myself from the constraints imposed on me by my family. Today, I am a writer, and I get to decide how I want to live my life. Tianxin, do you know what I would have been if I didn't have that dream when I was young? I would have been the girl next door who marries a man at 18 and bears his children. I would have had the dreary, mechanical life that my mother had lived. Fortunately, one book changed my destiny and made me the Duan I am today, not Madame Du." Qingxin had seldom heard Du-Wan reminiscence about the past before. Although he had known Du-Wan for decades, she'd always kept silent about her past. So, why was Du-Wan sharing her past now? So, Tianxin, don't be afraid. Just follow your heart, dare to dream, and then proceed to make it happen. One day, you'll realize your dream. One of the most horrible things someone can do is not have the courage to dream. If you're too scared to even dream, how will you ever be brave enough to do what you want in life? In fact, Qingxin fully agreed with what Du-Wan said.
Dare to dream.
Dare to make it happen. Only then could change take place in one's life. One shouldn't aim to be someone who busies themselves doing other things their entire life and never accomplishes anything. And, despite not having accomplished anything at all in their life, this person comforts themselves by claiming that a simple life is the best life one can have. Nodding, Li Qingcang responded. Yes, I know. I'll do my best and work hard. She would change her destiny, one step at a time. Bit by bit, she would transform her life. Looking at her grandmother, Li Qingcang resolved to make sure that her grandmother lived to a ripe old age. This dinner was especially significant for Qingxin and Du-Wan. It was at this dinner tonight that Qingxin decided to cast Li Tianxin as the female lead in Red Cherry. In Li Tianxin, he saw the unique qualities that Cherry had: kindness, beauty, intelligence, and determination. After dinner, Du-Wan took the initiative to clean up and told Li Tianxin and her grandmother to go rest and relax. Du-Wan could see that Li Tianxin, who'd been up since real early that morning, was very tired. Tianxin, you should go and rest. I'll clean up dinner. But Li Tianxin felt guilty about leaving Du-Wan to do the cleaning up and replied, Madam Du, let me do it. Let's do it together then. Du-Wan and Li Tianxin stood side by side at the sink and did the dishes together. Qingxin pulled out a compact slim camera from his shirt pocket and took a photo of them standing together at the sink from behind. But after taking one shot, he wanted to take more.
Tianxin, Du-Wan.
The two women standing at the sink both turned around in unison, natural looks of confusion on their faces. After Du-Wan helped Li Tianxin with the tidying up, she left the shop with Qingxin. Qingxin remarked, Long ago, you told me that you had a daughter. When I saw Tianxin at the shop entrance earlier, I thought she was your daughter. They look very much alike from behind. In fact, looking at the photos that I took of her, their faces are also very similar. Clicking open the photos, Du-Wan took one look at them and said, her voice laced with yearning, probably because all beautiful people look alike. That said, she let out a very long sigh. Sometimes, I wish she was my daughter. I've also thought about what my own daughter would be like if she were still alive. Probably similar to Tianxin. It's a shame, but I'm not someone who's destined to have a family. After she laid out the bedding for the night, Li Tianxin took out the clothes she had bought for her grandmother and asked, Grandma, do you like them? Grandma held the clothes in her hands and loved them at first sight. Although she didn't like the fact that Tianxin had spent money unnecessarily, she was touched by her granddaughter's thoughtfulness. Grandma, I bought these at the market earlier today. Please wear your new clothes tomorrow, okay? Her grandmother was reluctant to wear new clothes without occasion, protesting, but it's not even the new year. Why should I wear new clothes? We can wear new clothes, even if we're not celebrating the new year. Li Tianxin shared a bed with her grandmother. She decided that after her grandmother's medical checkup the next day, she would clean up the upper floor of the house. That way, Annie Du wouldn't need to go home and could stay on the upper floor instead. Li Tianxin was exhausted, so she went to bed early. Though she fell into a deep sleep, her grandmother was still wide awake. Although she was looking at Li Tianxin's face, Grandma was actually thinking of her own daughter. She wished with all her heart that there was such a thing as miracles in this world. Because if there was such a thing as miracles, then she'd be able to see her daughter again and tell her in person that, while she hadn't raised her well, she had done a pretty good job raising her granddaughter. Li Tianxin woke up at 4 in the morning. She had to go to the hospital and stand in line to register her grandmother for a medical checkup. Since they rarely traveled to capital city, her grandmother's medical checkup was her top priority. Trying hard to shake off her drowsiness, she splashed cold water on her face and headed out. By the time she arrived at the registration center of the hospital, a long line had already formed in front of the registration counter. Li Tianxin, feeling a tad cold, looked pale in the face as she made her way to the back of the line, sat on the ground, and started working on her exam practice questions to stay alert. If she had to wait in line at the hospital for 2 to 3 hours, Li Tianxin didn't intend to idle her time away. So, seated cross-legged on the ground, she started working on her questions. With the help of memory aid methodology, Li Tianxin's memory had improved by leaps and bounds. Although she hadn't quite gotten to the point where she had a photographic memory, all she had to do was read something through once, and she'd be able to recall about 80% of it. With her 2 copies of exam practice questions, Li Tianxin focused on working on the problems in the books. In the quiet of the hospital's registration area, apart from the sound of people breathing, the only sound that could be heard was the scratching noise made by Li Tianxin's pencil as she wrote down her answers to the exam questions. It was 7 sharp, the official start time for registration. Fortunately, Li Tianxin had the foresight to get there early because she was the last person in line to be given a slot for that day for the specialist she planned to consult. Others in line behind her, who also wanted to consult the same specialist, would have to come back another day. After registration, Li Tianxin took the bus back to the bookshop. Her grandmother was already up and was sweeping the yard. When she heard Yi Tianxin push the door open, she asked, Tianxin, where have you been? Grandma, I was at the hospital. I'm going to take you there for a medical checkup later. When her grandmother heard what Yi Tianxin said, she replied, I'm not going to the hospital. If I go there, they'll claim I'm suffering from all kinds of illnesses even though I'm perfectly healthy. I'm in the pink of health. I have a good appetite. I drink plenty of water, and I sleep very well. Grandma, I've already registered you. Surely, you wouldn't want to let the money I spent on the registration fees go to waste. Yi Tianxin said deliberately, knowing that her grandmother would eventually give in because she didn't want to let the money she'd spent on the registration fee go to waste. How much was the registration fee? Her grandmother asked. Yi Tianxin replied, $100 for a specialist consultation. I left at 4 this morning to join the queue, and was given a last appointment for today. Grandma, let's just go and get you checked out, all right? If you refuse to go with me for your medical checkup, then I won't take the college entrance exams.
Fuming, her grandmother twistet Yi Tianxin sayar.
It was a gentle twist, but Yi Tianxin acted up and pretended that it hurt a lot. How could you stake your future on blackmailing your grandmother? Grandma, because you scared me to death. Do you know how terrified I was when you suddenly collapsed on me? So, Grandma, please listen to me, okay? Let's go get you examined. It's just a physical exam. It won't cost that much. Think about it. If you refuse to get a checkup, I'll end up having to focus on preparing for my entrance exams and worrying about your condition at the same time. You tell me, is that what you want? Eventually, Grandma gave in and agreed to go. Knowing that she might have to give blood as part of the examination, Yi Tianxin and her grandmother skipped breakfast. It was peak travel time for people commuting to and from work, so Yi Tianxin and her grandmother were only able to board the bus after much difficulty. Although their journey was only a few stops, Yi Tianxin felt like it'd never end. When they arrived at the hospital, Yi Tianxin first took her grandmother to the area outside the doctor's office, where she informed the assistant doctor of the purpose of their visit. The assistant doctor then issued Yi Tianxin a stack of test slips and asked her to take her grandmother to get the required tests done. Yi Tianxin took her grandmother to the test center to have her blood drawn. After her grandmother's blood was taken, Yi Tianxin went to the little stall at the entrance of the hospital and bought some milk, eggs, and bread for her grandmother. Tianxin, you eat up. I'm not hungry. Not wanting to waste such good food on herself, Grandma started to shove it toward Yi Tianxin. So Yi Tianxin had to resort to saying, Grandma, I've already eaten. I had breakfast when I came here this morning to line up for registration. Yi Tianxin settled her grandmother on a bench with her food and then went to the radiology center to register. After she registered, she headed back to the bench and discovered that her grandmother was no longer there. Grandma, she called. Grandma. Yi Tianxin searched everywhere, asking people along the way if they'd seen her grandmother. But since there was always a constant stream of people coming in and out of the hospital, no one had seen her grandmother. Yi Tianxin suddenly became worried, afraid that her grandmother might have been entrapped by medical scammers. What should she do if her grandmother had been entrapped by medical scammers? Yi Tianxin, tears of panic welling up in her eyes, raised her head and noticed a CCTV camera. She asked for directions to the security control room and literally flew there. Because she was pretty and a sweet talker, the people in the security control room made an exception and checked the videos in the vicinity. A familiar figure eventually appeared before Yi Tianxin's eyes. When she saw that familiar figure, Yi Tianxin started shaking involuntarily. It was her. It was really her. Yi Tianxin quickly tried to calm herself. Turning around, she thanked the good-hearted people who had helped her. Thank you so much. Yi Tianxin went to the building where her grandmother had been spotted on the CCTV footage. It was the building that housed the hospital's wards. Yi Tianxin saw her grandmother in the lobby on the first floor. Grandma. At that moment, her grandmother hadn't yet realized that the nice young lady who had lured her there was in fact a scammer. Tianxin, there you are.
Come along, Grandma.
Let's go get your test done. Seeing that Yi Tianxin was pulling her toward the exit, Grandma asked, puzzled, Isn't this the place for ultrasound scans? Nope. It's in a different location. Yi Tianxin didn't tell her grandmother how terrified she'd been when she discovered that she was missing. Also, she didn't want her grandmother to find out prematurely about the existence of that family. She didn't want the tranquil life that she and her grandmother enjoyed to be ruined by that family of Lus. After all the tests were completed, Grandma and Yi Tianxin returned to the doctor's office with the test results. Eyeing the test results in Yi Tianxin's hand, the doctor commented gently, The old lady is in pretty good condition. Yi Tianxin knew very well that her grandmother wasn't well at all because, during the ultrasound and CT scans, the doctor had informed her that he could see shadows in certain areas. Oh, really? Thank you, doctor. The doctor, sensing that Yi Tianxin was playing along with him, replied, You're welcome. Walking out of the doctor's office with Yi Tianxin, Grandma said, Tianxin, what did I tell you? There's nothing wrong with my health. You just didn't believe me. To which, Yi Tianxin responded with a smile. See, Grandma? The medical checkup has given us peace of mind. After walking a few steps, Yi Tianxin suddenly stopped and exclaimed, Grandma, I've forgotten one of the reports. Wait here for me. Don't go anywhere with anybody. I'd be terrified if I came back and you weren't here. Not suspecting anything, her grandmother nodded and sat on a bench to wait for Yi Tianxin. Soothing her violently pounding heart, Yi Tianxin ran back to the doctor's office. When the doctor saw her, he was momentarily stunned. Doctor, my grandmother's illness. Is it operable? The doctor deliberated for a while before saying, it is operable, but surgery would only buy your grandmother a little more time. Also, this surgery would be very costly, and I don't think you guys would be able to fork over that much money. Doctor, please tell me, what is the estimated cost of the surgery? As long as it can help my grandmother live longer, I'll use any means necessary to raise the money. At least 500,000. Li Qingcang knew that even though the doctor said it would only cost $500,000, it would actually cost a lot more than that. A lot more. The problem was that there were only 50,000 in her grandmother's bank deposit book. That amount was like a drop in the ocean compared to how much the treatment for her grandmother's illness would cost. Now, in addition to preparing for the college entrance exams, she'd have to find work as well. How could she, within such a short period of time, make $1 million? Young lady, judging by your appearance, you don't look like you come from a well-to-do family. Think about it and work out for yourself whether this is really necessary. My grandmother's cancer, has it spread to other areas? Yes, it has spread. Also, even with surgery and subsequent cancer treatment, in her condition, your grandmother still might not be able to hold on for that much longer. Li Qingcang hung her head. With tears in her eyes, she asked, so, what can we do? I can't just sit back, do nothing, and give up on my grandmother. The doctor told it as it was. Young lady, think this through carefully. My suggestion is that since your grandmother is already quite old, there's no need to cut her up. Li Qingcang was well aware that the doctor was thinking of what was best for her when he made that suggestion, but she didn't need his kindness. Looking dazed, Li Qingcang left the doctor's office. In the distance, she could see her grandmother sitting alone on the bench, waiting for her to return. Tears streamed down Li Qingcang's face. She couldn't possibly give up on her grandmother. She was determined to get her grandmother's illness treated. She would definitely raise enough money to have her grandmother treated. With the best medicine. With the best doctors. She was determined, so determined, to make sure that her grandmother stayed alive and well. Grandma. Li Qingcang sat beside her grandmother, and together they watched the constant stream of people in the hospital hurrying to and fro. Her grandmother sighed. There are so many people in Capital City. So many in the hospital and on the buses. There are people everywhere. Grandma, are you homesick? Li Qingcang rested her head on her grandmother's shoulders, fully aware that her grandmother was homesick. Grandma had spent so many years in the town of Yancheng, and now, having to come to an unfamiliar place, she was surely uncomfortable. Nope. This is my first trip to Capital City, Grandma replied, her words not reflecting her true feelings. Laughing softly, Li Qingcang said, Grandma, it's too early to say for sure, but I might not have passed the preliminary interview. If I didn't make it past the first round, we'll have to head back home in the afternoon 2 days from now. That won't happen. My Tianxin is so capable. How could you not make it? Grandma consoled Li Qingcang, and they both sat there quietly, mulling over their own thoughts. Auntie. A familiar voice sounded in her ears, and Li Qingcang felt her head start to pound loudly, as if fireworks had exploded in her head. Confused, Grandma raised her head and looked up at the person standing in front of them. Are you Jijuan? Lu Jijuan. Yes, Auntie. Lu Jijuan's eyes landed on Li Tianxin. My word, she is all grown up now, he thought. Auntie, why are you and Tianxin in Capital City? He asked. Grandma looked worriedly at Li Tianxin, then replied, I came here with Tianxin for her interviews at Capital Film Academy. What about you? Is anyone from your family unwell? Lu Jijuan didn't even hear what Grandma said. He just kept looking at Li Tianxin. She had grown into a beautiful young woman, and she looked a lot like Yi Linlang. Those eyes and those brows, she was undoubtedly Yi Linlang's daughter. Auntie, please can we talk? To Lu Jijuan's question, Grandma responded, You and I, we have nothing to talk about. Lu Jijuan then turned toward Yi Tianxin and asked, Tianxin, do you remember me? We met when you were young. Yi Tianxin honestly shook her head no. She couldn't remember ever having met Lu Jijuan. Or perhaps they had met when she was really young. However, at that age, she would have been too young to remember meeting him. Tianxin, let's go. Dragging Yi Tianxin along, Grandma proceeded to leave the hospital. However, Lu Jijuan wasn't going to let this chance meeting with Yi Tianxin and her grandmother slip by. He immediately stepped in front of Grandma and stopped her in her tracks. Auntie, you're already advanced in age. Can't you have a peaceful talk with me? I have no ill intentions. Yi Tianxin glared fiercely at Lu Jijuan. My grandmother doesn't want to talk to you. Please don't stand in our way. Lu Jijuan laughed softly, and a look of nostalgia appeared on his face. You look exactly like Lin Lang when you're upset. Despicable and shameless. Yi Tianxin cursed him silently. Do you know my mother? If so, do you also know my father? Yi Tianxin asked innocently. Looking at the adorable Yi Tianxin, Lu Jijuan reached his hand out, wanting to touch her head. I am your. Tianxin, go buy me a bottle of water. I'm feeling a little thirsty. Her grandmother quickly cut in, stopping Lu Jijuan from saying anything further. Yi Tianxin clearly understood her grandmother's intentions. Grandma wanted to stop Lu Jijuan from talking but couldn't think of any other way to do so than by making up the excuse that she was thirsty. Yi Tianxin could only obey her grandmother and go off to buy her a bottle of water. Lu Jijuan, more than a decade ago, I told you that Linlang is my daughter and that Tianxin is my granddaughter. For the rest of my life, as long as I'm breathing, I will never hand Tianxin over to you. Thank you for continuing to send money to me and Tianxin all these years. I've always returned the money to you untouched. I just don't want to have anything to do with you whatsoever. Lu Jijuan knew that Grandma had a fiery temper. Pulling Grandma to sit back on the bench, he began to speak in all sincerity. Auntie, I know you resent me and hate me, but Tianxin's all grown up now. Can't we set aside all our past grievances and calmly discuss Tianxin's future? Tianxin's going to be 18 this year, and she's about to take the college entrance exams, correct? I heard that Tianxin's grades have been consistently bad. In that case, what university would she be able to get accepted to? Let's pretend that she does get accepted into the film academy. Tell me, Auntie, how would you fund her education there? And what if Tianxin doesn't go to college? What next? Would she have to slog it out as a blue-collar worker at her young age? Or would she just get married? Auntie, I know that you were badly hurt by what happened to Linlang, which is why you want to keep Tianxin by your side. Lu Jijuan stopped talking. I'll never hand Tianxin over to you. When that incident with Linlang blew up all those years ago, you came to see us. I now repeat what I told you then. For as long as I live, I will never hand Tianxin over to you. The only way you'll ever be able to take her from me is over my dead body. Having made this brutal statement, Grandma stood up to walk away. But Lu Jijuan refused to give up, still hoping he could win her over with his rationale and touch her with his actions. He reached out to tug at Grandma's arm. In one dash, Yi Tianxin rushed over to them and stood in front of her grandmother. Like a warrior, she blocked Lu Jijuan's outstretched hand. You, what do you think you're doing? Lu Jijuan retracted his hand, looking embarrassed. He looked at Yi Tianxin, his face filled with fatherly love. Tianxin, I just want to talk to your grandmother. My grandmother doesn't want to talk to you. Grandma, let's go. Yi Tianxin helped her grandmother along as they walked away out of Lu Jijuan's line of sight. Lu Jijuan stood rooted in the same spot. While he watched the grandmother and granddaughter pair walk away, all he could think about was the woman who had always been at the forefront of his mind. Bah! Li Qingcang, together with Yancheng, had spotted Lu Jijuan from afar and called out to him. Pa, who were you talking to earlier? Lu Jijuan replied. Someone I know. Qingxin, is your ankle all right? Latching onto Lu Jijuan's arm, Li Qingcang acted coy and said sweetly. Pa, I'm all right. It's just a minor sprain. Yancheng was just being overcautious. He insisted on having an x-ray done. Even the doctor confirmed that it's nothing serious. Just listen to yourself. Yancheng here was simply concerned about you and did it for your own good, Lu Jijuan commented. Li Qingcang pouted unhappily and said, I know that Yancheng did it for my own good. But you know how much I hate hospitals. In the future, you should be more careful when going down the stairs. Don't get injured again. Nodding, Li Qingcang said, Got it. Pa, you're so long-winded. You've turned into an old man. Really? Subconsciously, Lu Jijuan wondered if he had really grown old. Let's go. I'll take you guys to the hotel first. Gu Yancheng supported Li Qingcang as they walked to the car. Leaning against Gu Yancheng's shoulders, Li Qingcang said crisply, Yancheng, I want to eat KFC. No, you cannot. That's all junk food. Gu Yancheng bluntly refused her request without a second thought. Li Qingcang pretended to cry, whining, Yancheng, you have such a cruel heart. I'm sick. Why can't you just give in and let me have my way? You know very well that you're sick and that you can't eat junk food. After he said this, Gu Yancheng noticed Li Qingcang's large, tear-filled eyes. Eventually, he gave in. All right then. Just this once. Never again. Li Qingcang immediately hugged Gu Yancheng tightly. Yancheng, you're the best, she said. Feeling her gentle, soft body against his chest, Gu Yancheng's face instantly turned crimson red. Not realizing the effect that she had had on him, Li Qingcang asked, Yancheng, are you not feeling well? Your face is flushed. Gu Yancheng sighed. Li Qingcang, that silly girl. How could she possibly be so naive? He was, after all, a real man. Lu Jijuan drove his 7-seater multipurpose vehicle and stopped it beside Li Qingcang and Gu Yancheng. Gu Yancheng slid open the door and helped Li Qingcang get into the car first. Then, he climbed in and carefully helped Li Qingcang with her seatbelt. When they were settled in, Lu Jijuan started driving out of the hospital parking lot. When he drove past the bus stop located in front of the hospital, Lu Jijuan noticed Yi Tianxin and her grandmother standing there, waiting for the bus. Auntie, Tianxin, where are you going? He called. Let me give you a ride there. Li Qingcang turned around and saw Yi Tianxin through the car window, and the events from yesterday's interview floated into her mind. Yancheng, look, she said. It's the girl from yesterday. Gu Yancheng also turned around to look and saw Yi Tianxin and her grandmother. Puzzled, he looked at Lu Jijuan. He wondered how Uncle Lu could possibly be acquainted with people like them. Lu Jijuan had already unbuckled his seatbelt and walked in front of Yi Tianxin and her grandmother. Auntie, Tianxin, let's go. Let me give you a ride. Thank you for the kind offer, but my grandma and I would get carsick in a car like this. Lu Jijuan's MPV had stopped right in front of the bus stop, and at that moment, a bus was currently approaching, but the MPV was in its way. The bus driver repeatedly sounded his horn. Sticking his head out of the front window, the bus driver yelled, Hey, the car in front. Are you moving or not? Why are you hogging publicly funded resources when you have a private car? Get moving and get out of our way. Lu Jijun looked up at the people waiting at the bus stop and smiled apologetically. Moving right now. Auntie, Tianxin, get into the car please. Grandma and Yi Tianxin had no other option but to get into the MPV. When Grandma saw Li Qingcang, she cried out in surprise, "Oh, aren't you the nice young lady who showed me to the ultrasound department at the hospital?" Despite having done a bad thing, Li Qingcang didn't feel one bit guilty. Smiling sweetly at Grandma, she replied, "Oh, Granny, it's you." Grandma had no idea that Li Qingcang had deliberately led her to the wrong place. Did the simple-minded Grandma really think that Li Qingcang was a nice girl? Truth be told, Li Qingcang's dark side was a deeply buried secret. If Yi Tianxin hadn't seen it with her own eyes in her past life, she never would have known how scheming and evil Li Qingcang really was, and how deep she kept this evil nature of hers hidden from everyone else. "Tianxin, this is the young lady who showed me the way at the hospital." After helping her grandmother settle into her seat, Yi Tianxin looked at Li Qingcang, who was seated across from her. "Grandma, although Miss Lu didn't lead you to the ultrasound department, I should still thank Miss Lu." Yancheng swirled around and glared at Yi Tianxin. Looking stern, he tersely remarked, "Why are you being weird about this?" Since this was Qingxin's first trip to Capital First Hospital, it's normal that she wasn't able to locate the ultrasound department. Do you really have to be so vicious-minded and insinuate that Qingxin didn't mean well?
Ha, Ye Tianjin laf et scornfully.
Before she could even speak up, Lu Qingxin grabbed hold of Yancheng's hand and said, "Hush, Yancheng.
Don't say that.
It was my fault. Seeing the old granny sitting there all alone, I shouldn't have led her away. I led her away from where she was, but didn't take her to the designated department for her tests. It's understandable that Missy is upset." Lu Qingxin's words infuriated Yi Tianxin, who rolled her eyes in anger up at the roof of the car. Good-hearted? How could Lu Qingxin have a good heart? Would she believe it? Only someone as stupid as Yancheng would believe every word that Lu Qingxin said. "Qingxin, you're just too kind at heart." Yancheng felt his heart stir with uneasiness. Qingxin was so innocent. What would she do if she was bullied in the future? "Tianxin, apologize to Miss Lu." Suddenly, Grandma spoke up. Yi Tianxin was stunned. Pouting, she protested. "But Grandma..." "Apologize." Grandma sounded a tad stern. Yi Tianxin didn't understand. It was obvious that the person who'd done something wrong was Lu Qingxin, not her, so why did she have to apologize? "Grandma." Yi Tianxin pleaded, reluctant to do so. "Apologize," Grandma said sternly. Remembering her grandmother's condition, Yi Tianxin didn't have the heart to upset her further, so she said to Lu Qingxin, "Sorry, Miss Lu. I misunderstood your good intentions." Lu Qingxin smiled sweetie and replied, "It's all right. I'm not upset. I understand." Yancheng looked disapprovingly at Lu Qingxin. Oh, this silly girl was just so exasperating. Lu Qingxin decided to let the matter slide and didn't pursue it further. She then turned to Lu Jijun and said, "Pa, how are you acquainted with Yi Tianxin? She and I were fated to meet. Our applicant numbers were next to each other during the arts interview." Through the rearview mirror, Lu Jijun looked at Lu Qingxin and Yi Tianxin and replied, "I'm acquainted with Tianxin's mother." Lu Qingxin made an "oh" sound and continued, "Since Yi Tianxin is so pretty, her mother must be even prettier." "Pa, were you one of Yi Tianxin's mother suitors?" Yancheng's curiosity was also aroused. Lu Jijun's ears suddenly turned red. "Tianxin's mother was very attractive back then. She had many admirers, and your father here was of course attracted to her as well." Seated in the back of the car, Yi Tianxin felt like throwing up when she heard what Lu Jijun said. She really didn't know how Lu Jijun had the audacity to speak like that in Lu Qingxin's presence. Lu Qingxin leaned forward slightly and said, "Pa, please tell me more." "Uncle is driving." Yancheng interrupted Lu Qingxin's interrogation. Being a man, Yancheng could instinctually tell that something wasn't quite right. He silently speculated that perhaps this Yi Tianxin was Uncle Lu's illegitimate daughter. If she was his illegitimate daughter, then surely Uncle Lu would want her to live with them in the Lu family home. And if Uncle Lu did bring Yi Tianxin home to live with them, both Qingxin and her mother would be hurt. "Oops, I forgot." Impishly, Lu Qingxin stuck out her tongue and stopped asking Lu Jijun any more questions. She then sat sideways and looked at Yi Tianxin. Lowering her voice, she asked, "Tianxin, have you ever engaged any acting professionals to teach you how to act? I noticed that your acting was very good. All the inspectors liked you a lot. It's probably a natural talent." Yi Tianxin replied shortly in a flat tone of voice. Seemingly unaware of Yi Tianxin's coldness, Lu Qingxin continued talking. "Then you must have inherited your mother's talent, unlike me. I'm so silly and dumb. I can't seem to pick up on anything that I'm taught." Lu Qingxin's words caused Yancheng's heart to ache badly. "Qingxin, you're not stupid at all. The way you play the violin is simply the best." "Oh, yes, but that's because I was pressured to play the violin by my mother. Actually, I don't like the violin at all, but my mother insisted on it, claiming that girls must learn one instrument so that they're better able to present themselves. Tianxin presents herself extremely well. Did your mother make you learn ballet, or the piano, or stuff like that?" Although seemingly focused on driving, Lu Jijuan's senses were heightened, picking up on every aspect of the conversation. When Yi Tianxin first got into the car, he had expected her and Li Qingcang to start fighting. Unexpectedly, the two seemed to be getting along amicably. If Li Qingcang didn't show any aversion to Yi Tianxin, he would discuss with his wife and arrange to bring Yi Tianxin home to live with them as a member of the Lu family. I didn't take any lessons at all, Yi Tianxin replied. Li Qingcang looked surprised. Really? Oh, how I envy you. If you don't need to attend any classes like that, then you must have lots of time on your hands to go out and have fun every day, unlike me. I'm so busy every day. Yancheng opened a bottle of mineral water and presented it to Li Qingcang. Drink some water. Yancheng, I'm not thirsty. Tianxin, what do you usually do with your time? Li Qingcang cocked her head and looked at Yi Tianxin's beautiful, long black hair, unable to suppress her envy. If you don't need to learn to play a musical instrument, you probably have a lot of time to spare. How do you usually pass the time? This was the same question that Li Qingcang had asked her in her past life. At that time, Yi Tianxin didn't have any defense mechanisms against Li Qingcang and freely admitted to her that she used to skip classes to surf the net at the internet cafes, spinning the stories to sound like heroic tales. Not long after that, many people came to know about Yi Tianxin's delinquent past of skipping classes and getting embroiled in fights, and that she was generally a bad kid with little education or skills. Studying and doing exam questions.
Li Tianxin replied naturally.
Li Qingxin's voice was laced with disappointment as she said, Really? So, what university will you be applying to? Is Capital Film Academy your first choice?
No.
Capital University is my first choice. Yi Tianxin, being intentionally provocative, asked, What about you? Is Capital University your first choice too? We can be college mates then. Of course. Oh, right. Let me introduce you. This is Yancheng. He is a first-year student at Capital University. Looking at Yancheng with immense satisfaction, Li Qingcang continued her introduction in a serious tone. Yancheng is our scholar from Shanghai City who got accepted into Capital University. Isn't he fantastic? Yancheng felt a tad self-conscious. That silly girl, always bragging about him to anyone she met. It was actually quite embarrassing. Oh, really? That's definitely quite amazing. Yi Tianxin had no intention of listening anymore to Li Qingcang's incessant chatter. From afar, Yi Tianxin could see the main gates of Capital Film Academy. In her lovely voice, she said, Uncle, we're here. Please stop the car. Lu Jijuan stopped the car at the main gates of Capital Film Academy. Li Qingcang and Yancheng got off first, followed by Yi Tianxin and her grandmother. Lu Jijuan looked at Grandma and Yi Tianxin and asked, Where are you staying? Let me take you to the doorstep. Thank you, Uncle, but the place we're staying at isn't accessible by car. Lu Jijuan took out a business card and handed it to Yi Tianxin. Tianxin, keep this business card. Call me if you need anything. That said, Lu Jijuan extracted a wad of notes from his wallet and handed it to Yi Tianxin. Take this and buy yourself some nice clothes. Thank you, but I don't need it. Grandma, let's go. Yi Tianxin helped her grandmother into the grounds of Capital Film Academy. She had no intention whatsoever of letting Li Qingcang find out where they were staying. Neither did she wish to get entangled with Lu Jijuan at this point in time. Her grandmother was already seriously ill. She didn't want to waste her precious time and energy on these matters. She just wanted to raise the funds as soon as possible for her grandmother's treatment. Grandma, if I get accepted into Capital Film Academy, I'll be studying here at this university. After that, I'll be able to work at Capital Film Academy's production houses. If I become a full-time actor, I'll get a salary. Her grandmother nodded. It was an overcast day. However, there weren't any dark clouds gathering in the sky above them. It was just a gloomy, overcast sky. But Grandma was very unhappy. Holding Yi Tianxin's hands, she asked quietly, Tianxin, were you really upset when I made you apologize to that young lady earlier? Yi Tianxin was extremely quick to reply. Of course not. I wasn't angry with you, Grandma. I could never be angry with you. Tianxin, my wish for my dear Tianxin is that you'll be my little Tianxin who wears a sweet smile on her face every day. Grandma doesn't want you to turn into someone who's calculative and small-minded. Nodding vigorously, Yi Qingxin said, Grandma, I understand what you mean. Silly girl. Grandma. But before she could finish her sentence, Grandma suddenly collapsed. Yi Tianxin screamed in panic and fell on top of her grandmother, shaking and calling her with everything she had. Fortunately, within Capital Film Academy, there was a kind person who helped Yi Tianxin out by calling the emergency services. The ambulance arrived in no time, and Yi Tianxin and her grandmother were sent to the hospital. Doctor, this is grandmother's medical report. To ensure that her grandmother was treated right away, Yi Tianxin immediately handed her grandmother's medical report over to the doctor. After scanning it briefly, the doctor instructed, let's first get her admitted. Okay. Yi Qingxin was in such an anxious state that she didn't know what to do. Registering for admittance to the hospital required prepayment, but Grandma had left her bank book at the bookshop. Should she head back to the bookshop for the bank book? But then, what about Grandma? Doctor, can you please help me out here and go ahead and get her admitted? I'll pay later. Would that be possible? Put on the spot, the doctor replied awkwardly. I cannot do that. You need to pay first, and then arrange for her to be admitted. That's standard procedure. How could I let you leave? What would we do if you left and didn't come back? They had encountered incidents like this before at the hospital. Abandonment of a sick elderly person wasn't uncommon. There had even been cases of newborn infants being abandoned. Yi Tianxin was so desperate that tears started to well up in her eyes. Seemingly out of control, she yelled, "Of course not. I would never desert my grandmother. I'm just going to head back to get the money. If you don't believe me, I can leave my applicant's pass with you as collateral." Looking exasperated, the doctor glanced at Yi Tianxin and responded, "Young lady, what would I do with your applicant's pass? Please quickly think this through. If you really don't have the money, then you should just wait until your grandmother comes around and take her home. If you want your grandmother to be treated, then you need to pay to get her admitted." Yi Tianxin was so frantic that her hands were trembling. She definitely wanted her grandmother to be treated. Since she didn't have the money, she would take out a loan in order to get her grandmother treated. However, she didn't have the power to split herself into two, so how would she be able to stay at the hospital and head back to the bookshop for the bank deposit book at the same time?
Phone.
May I please use the phone? Clutching the phone in the doctor's office, Yi Tianxin retrieved the piece of paper that Yan Ge had given her and dialed the number on it. The call was quickly answered by someone on the other end. "Hello, who's this?" At the sound of a friendly voice, Yi Tianxin's floodgates opened, and she started wailing. "Hello, this is the number that Yan Ge gave me. He told me that if I ever got into any trouble while in capital city, that I should call this number. Can you help me, please? My grandmother's sick. I need to go get my grandmother's bank book to withdraw money and pay for her to be admitted. However, the people here are afraid that I'll just run away and won't come back, so they've refused to let me leave. But I'm not going to run away.
I'm really not.
If you're unsure about me, you could have someone come with me to the bookshop. I'm just going there to get the bank book." At the other end of the line, Li Qingcang could hear the young girl's tearful voice, and he subconsciously softened his tone. Gently, he said, Now, stop crying. When you cry and talk at the same time, I can't understand what you're trying to tell me. My grandmother is sick. I don't have any money on me to get her warded at the hospital. I need to go get my grandmother's bank book and withdraw money for her treatment." After Yi Tianxin finished talking, Li Qingcang finally understood what she was trying to tell him. "What hospital are you at? What department?" Yi Tianxin asked the doctor standing to the side and then replied, "Capital First Hospital. A&E department. Okay, wait for me. I'll come over right now." Yi Tianxin was a tad apprehensive. What if he was merely giving her lip service and wasn't planning to come over at all? "Please come. I'll be waiting here for you. I'm wearing a floral pattern dress, and I have dark hair. Oh, right, and my name is Yi Tianxin. If you can't find me, just shout my name, and I'll hear from you. Please come and help me out." After he hung up the phone, Li Qingcang proceeded to head out, but at that moment, Li Qingchin stood at the door, arms crossed, and blocked his exit. "Stay right there. Where do you think you're going now?" Li Qingcang looked at his sister and said quietly, "Give me your wallet." Li Qingchin retrieved her wallet and handed it to him. "What do you want it for?" she asked. "To save a life." Because the injuries Li Qingcang had recently sustained were serious, the Li family had had no choice but to forcibly restrain him at capital for his convalescence. And Li Qingchin was the only member of the family who could manage the little overlord. So, Li Qingchin visited him daily at the hospital just to keep an eye on this overbearing little brother of hers in case he got up to one of his tricks. Li Qingchin followed Li Qingcang to the A&E department. The moment Li Qingcang walked through the doors of the A&E department, he noticed Yi Tianxin, who was holding her grandmother's hands and weeping. Hazy memories from the night of his injury suddenly floated into his mind. He remembered the young girl at the rural clinic who pleaded with the doctor, saying in a sweet voice, "Be gentle. I can't handle pain." And yet, she gave him 600 milliliters of her own blood without batting an eye. "Yi Tianxin." Hearing her name, Yi Tianxin answered reflexively, "Yes, I'm here." Yi Tianxin looked at Li Qingcang. He was about 1.83 to 1.85 meters tall, short-haired, and looked to be very energetic. He was clad in Capital First Hospital's standard-issue patient's garb, but the blue and white striped uniform seemed a tad too short for him because it exposed most of his calves. Nonetheless, even the ordinariness of his patient's uniform could do nothing to conceal the majestic aura that emanated from him. "Are you Yanji's friend?" "Excuse me, but I didn't know you were a patient here. I was really at my wit's end and couldn't find anyone to help me out. Can I please trouble you to stay here and keep an eye on my grandmother while I head out with this beautiful sister to get the money?" Sizing up the situation, Li Qingchin quietly stepped behind Li Qingcang. Li Qingcang felt like kicking himself. That Yan Ge should have told him. If he'd known in advance that the person who called him was the person who had saved his life, then he would have tried to clean himself up a bit before meeting her. But now, in his hospital garb, how would he be able to show off his heroism? Elegance? Good looks? Nobleness? About the money. "I'll pay for your grandmother to be admitted, and you can pay me back later. Your grandmother collapsed and is still unconscious. You must not leave her side. Patients are especially sensitive. If your grandmother comes around and doesn't see you the moment she opens her eyes, she'll definitely think that you've deserted her." Yi Tianxin considered what Li Qingcang said and decided that he was right. "Then I will write you an IOU." Li Qingcang declined her offer. What kind of person did she think he was? "There's no need to write an IOU. I trust you." However, Yi Tianxin was adamant and insisted, "I most certainly will write you an IOU. With Li Qingcang's help, Grandma was quickly admitted into the hospital. While the doctor was processing Grandma's admission, Li Qingcang was dragged outside by Li Qingchin, who thought he had designs on Tianxin and wanted to tell him off for his beastly behavior. Qingcang, that girl is really young. How could you? Li Qingcang replied tersely. Sis, what rubbish are you spouting now? That young girl saved my life. If she hadn't donated blood to me when I was critically injured, I wouldn't have been able to hang on long enough to be transported to the hospital in the city. Really? Li Qingchin didn't believe him. Grunting indignantly, Li Qingcang asked, Sis, I'm your brother. Do I look like a monster to you? There is some resemblance. Li Qingchin replied, and was almost throttled to death by Li Qingcang. Then again, if that young girl is the benefactor who saved your life, then we should definitely help her. But of course, repay kindness with kindness. That's one of the traditional core values of the Li family. That said, Li Qingcang placed his hand on Li Qingchin's shoulder. Sis, can I trouble you to get this young girl some daily necessities, please? Got it. Now scram and go back to your room. I'll take over from here. Li Qingcang glanced at Tianxin, who was in the ward. With a hint of regret in his voice, he muttered, I should have gotten Grandma a single occupancy room. This type of ward is shared by 3 people, and with people coming and going all the time, she won't be able to get proper rest.